Good morning, everyone. Are you hearing that? Good morning. Yeah, okay. Good morning. Not a good day to forget my umbrella, but we're happy to have you here today. I'm Rula El-Sarrag, and I have the privilege of serving as the director of the Center for Health and Biosciences here at the Baker Institute for Public Policy. It is with great enthusiasm that I extend a warm welcome to each and every one of you to our Education Symposium, Closing the COVID-19 Achievement Gap in Schools. I would like to acknowledge that this event is made possible through the sponsorship of our Child Health Policy Program. Our purpose today is to explore three crucial topics that have come to the forefront amidst the challenges of the COVID-19 pandemic: early childhood education, teacher stress and support, and the invaluable lessons we've learned for safeguarding mental health in future crises. The pandemic has revealed the deep-seated inequalities within our educational system, impacting students from diverse backgrounds. As we convene today, we share a collective dedication to confronting these disparities and forging a path toward a more just and equitable educational environment. Our discussions today extend beyond immediate concerns. They are about forging a path forward, a path that leads to a more resilient, equitable, and responsive educational system. Through collaboration, innovation, and a shared decision to our students, we hold the power to mitigate the lasting effects of the pandemic and ensure a brighter future for all. We are honored to have a distinguished panel of experts with us today. Their expertise will shed light on these critical topics, and I encourage all participants to actively engage in this dialogue. It is through our collective insights and unwavering dedication that we can pave the way for a more promising tomorrow in our schools. Before we delve into our discussions, there are a few logistical matters to address. Please take a moment to set your mobile devices to silent mode as a gesture of courtesy to our speakers and fellow attendees. We will be actively encouraging questions from our audience throughout the event, which can be submitted using the question cards provided at your tables. Kindly place your questions in the center of your table, and our team will be promptly collecting them for consideration. And now it is my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Robert Sanborn. Dr. Sanborn is an esteemed leader, advocate, and activist who has made significant contributions to the realms of education and child welfare. As the president and CEO of Children at Risk, his influence has been instrumental in extending the organization's reach and impact. Dr. Sanborn holds an undergraduate degree from Florida State University and earned his doctorate from Columbia University in New York City. Prior to his pivotal role in the nonprofit sector, he held distinguished positions in higher education at renowned institutions such as Rice University and Hampshire College. Under his visionary leadership, Children at Risk has witnessed remarkable expansion, marked by the establishment of centers in Dallas and Fort Worth. Dr. Sanborn's achievements include the inauguration of the Public Policy and Law Center, the Children at Risk Institute, the Center for Parenting and Family Wellbeing, and the Center to End Trafficking and Exploitation of Children. Furthermore, he serves as the executive editor of two peer-reviewed open-access academic journals, the Journal of Applied Research on Children and the Journal of Family Strengths. Additionally, he is the host of the widely acclaimed radio program and podcast Growing Up in America, aired on the Pacifica Radio Network. With that, we stand at the threshold of an enlightening and transformative discussion. Thank you for your dedication to the future of education, and let us collectively commence this exciting journey towards closing the COVID-19 achievement gap in schools.
How's everyone doing? It's a big group, so it's always exciting to be in such a big group. Last night I had an event in Dallas, a big fundraiser that I had to go to. So late into the night we were raising money. That's what we call it, raising money. And then I had to come this morning and take a super early flight back into Dallas, back into Houston. So I'm glad to be here, but please pardon me if I seem a little bit road weary. So I'm excited to be here at Rice. Some of you know I worked at Rice for many years. I have a love for Rice. I still have season tickets to Rice football. So I was here last week when we beat University of Houston, right? Which was really fantastic. It was a great victory. It's not often that at Rice you go, to really experience the thrill of victory. And in many ways, doing my work as a child advocate in the state of Texas, It's much like being a supporter of Rice football, right? There aren't a lot of victories, but you get that thrill every once in a while. And so talking about COVID and closing the COVID gap is something that we've been doing a lot of over the last year or so at Children at Risk. We've been doing it all over the state. And what's unfortunate is that people want to move on, right? Is that people want to say, hey, you know, COVID's over. Make sure you get your boosters, by the way. COVID's over, and we just want to move on and get going. Unfortunately, for a lot of our kids, the impact of COVID is still very real, and we'll talk a little bit about that today as we get going. So you just have to pay a little bit of attention to the media to understand that there is pandemic learning loss. And I remember early on in the pandemic when we were closing schools and people started talking about pandemic learning loss, and it became this realization, right? Much like summer learning loss, there's going to be this big impact. What's interesting, though, is that a lot of things have developed as we've talked about pandemic learning loss. And so let's look at a snapshot of children, specifically K through 12 students in the state of Texas, right? So close to 5 million of our kids are in public schools. And we've seen an overall drop in performance with those kids. But here's the interesting thing is that we have 75% of our kids in Texas are children of color, right? People often don't get that. That's a big number. But more importantly for our discussion today, 63% of our kids are coming from low-income families. And that is the group that has been most impacted by this COVID learning loss. A third of our kids across the state of Texas are children of immigrants or immigrant children themselves, and oftentimes emergent bilingual kids, English language learners. Those kids super impacted as well by this, as we'll get into this. When we look across our state, and many of you know Children at Risk has been doing a look at public schools for the last 18 years, right? Where we look at the data for every single school. We create a scintillating ranking of all the schools that all the media really love. It's a little bit anti-intellectual, but people love it. And parents love this idea of trying to compare schools, like, is my school good? And so with this, we've been able to track how schools are doing. And when we look at specifically schools that primarily serve the 75% and above of the kids are low income, what we find is that there's only about 19% of those that sort of fall into this A or B category. So out of the 2,300 schools that sort of are primarily serve low income kids, there's only 436 of them that are considered pretty good schools. And what's interesting is that this number is significantly higher than it used to be. When we started looking at this 18 years ago, we were hard pressed, you know, unless we found a magnet school, unless we found a high-performing charter, we would not find neighborhood schools that were high performers that primarily serve low-income kids. And so we really want to pay attention to the kids in these schools as we look at pandemic learning loss. So at learning loss, we know that with the summer slide, there's been a lot. As we look at this, though, the loss has been greater in math. There's been a higher disparity in the higher grade levels, and certainly it's been on these low-income kids, as I've mentioned. And as I mentioned, you know, things were getting better in the state of Texas. So pre-pandemic, we were seeing an increase for low-income kids. So there was a lot of things were happening that were making this work. And amongst those was this access to all-day, high-quality pre-K. Probably one of the most profound things that had an impact on these kids performing well has been pre-K. When we look specifically at math and reading scores, I think this is sort of astounding to people, is that 48% of 3rd through 8th graders below grade reading levels, below grade level in reading, 57% below grade level in math. And again, low-income kids are the ones that primarily fall behind in this. So I think this is astounding. I think your average Texan doesn't understand how poorly our kids are doing and how poorly, we tout this idea that we have a great education system. And maybe compared to, some developing countries, we do have a great education system. But the fact of the matter is that we're not where we need to be. So this is basically, lower income, lower scores as we move forward. But there are two things that are really sort of the things that have a lot of us worried the most when it comes to pandemic and pandemic learning loss, and that's pre-K and early childhood education. So it was maybe about 8 years ago or so, we did a study with the Meadows Foundation, funded us to do a big statewide study looking at the impact of pre-K. And this is when we started seeing that when you had a high quality pre-K program, the payoff was absolutely there. And the places across the state that were doing full day high quality pre-K were the school districts in the Rio Grande Valley. There were school districts around Dallas, and HISD was doing it. And so when we started seeing these high performing, low income schools, they were all in those areas. And then we looked to see who was having this high quality pre-K. And one of the interesting things is that San Antonio around this time decided we're gonna do a city tax and we're gonna do pre-K 4SA. And the idea is that we're gonna have universal pre-K. And so they created these pre-K centers where lucky few students would get to go to these high quality pre-K centers. But what happened with those places, and they're still going today, and it's hard to go to, San Antonio is very defensive, right? So you go to San Antonio, you say you're doing it wrong, they really hate to hear it. So I am a big enemy of everyone in San Antonio. And they have horrible schools, and I tell them that all the time. And so, but what they're doing is that they have pre-K, and they have these cohorts of kids in pre-K, and then those kids go off to other elementary schools. And so as a kindergarten teacher, you may have 2 kids that went through high quality pre-K. And so you're not teaching now to that whole big cohort, as opposed to HISD or all the schools in the Rio Grande Valley where these kids are getting a pre-K education. And then as a cohort, they go into kindergarten together, and they're all educated at sort of the same level. And we're seeing much higher impact for those kids when that happens. So what we've seen, though, with COVID is that enrollment in pre-K is completely down, right? Is that certainly for the 2 years that COVID was a big deal, you had lots of people who didn't go to pre-K, and you still have lots of moms that aren't sending their kids, moms and dads that aren't sending their kids off to pre-K. So we're very worried about that group of kids that they really never got pre-K. And if we look at the past evidence as sort of what's going to happen in the future, what we see is that there's this whole group of kids that aren't going to be successful as they move forward. And so also for non-native English speakers, this is an essential piece. And then there's Heckman out of the University of Chicago, who has this whole equation. For every dollar you invest, you have this multiple payback around early education. And so we try to pay attention to that too. Our state legislature is not going to pay attention to a guy from the University of Chicago, right? No matter what his accolades are. But we have to try to sort of reframe it for Texas in many ways. And when we look at early childhood education, what we see is that first off, in the state of Texas, our state legislature is paying much more attention to early education than they used to in the past. Many people forget that when Greg Abbott first ran for governor, the #1 thing on his platform was early education and pre-K. What he realized is that primary voters didn't really care about that, and so he's moved away from that. But inherently, he's there. And Mike Morath, who is the TEA commissioner, one of the big things that he did when he was on the school board in Dallas is that he made this proposal, tongue-in-cheek. He said, why don't we get rid of 12th grade in Dallas ISD and focus it all on early education? And he was trying to make the point that early education is much more important for the success of kids than maybe 12th grade is. But of course, we're talking about Texas, and football is very important. We're not going to eliminate 12th grade because of football. So his proposal didn't happen. But I think when I talk about this, it's all about we have people in leadership who understand the importance of pre-K and early education. But as a whole, the state legislature doesn't seem to get it. But when we look at Houston specifically, 76% of our kids are living in a subsidized childcare desert. This is a desert where they're not getting access to subsidized childcare, which is essential for them. And then we look at childcare workers. It's another big deal. 20% of child care centers shut down during the pandemic, never to reopen. And there's been a lot of funding for child care centers through ARPA, through the federal government, sort of as this, get over COVID. That funding is about to run out, and we anticipate a lot more child care centers failing at this point because our state is not putting any money into this, right? Many people don't realize the Texas Workforce Commission is almost entirely funded out of child care dollars from the federal government. And so, so what we don't do in Texas is we don't put our own state dollars into early education. We take it all from the federal government. And so when we have money running out because of ARPA, because of COVID ending, it's going to have this impact, this significant impact on our kids and certainly on our workforce who have to find a place to put their kids, right? These are maps of child care deserts where people were not able to find quality subsidized child care. First a map from before the pandemic and then after the pandemic. And this gives you an idea. Everything in red is sort of a new child care desert. So we're entering this crisis. And it's especially a crisis for K through 12 because, again, these low-income kids, if they're not getting high-quality early education, they're not going to be performing at levels that we want them to perform at, right? If we want, Texas is super under-colleged, right? We don't send enough kids to college in the state of Texas. And whenever I go talk to legislators, they say, well, college isn't for everyone. The fact of the matter is that the numbers of kids that go to college in Texas is far lower than most other states. So college is for a lot more in Texas than are going right now. And we're not going to get more of those kids going to college if we don't have good, high-quality early education, if we don't have good, high-quality pre-K, and people taking advantage of those. So I mentioned these pieces of information about K through 12 schools. So let's talk a little bit more about K through 12. Right as the pandemic was ending, in our rankings, we decided to look at pandemic-proof schools, is what we called it. So schools that seem to emerge from the pandemic sort of unaltered, right? They're still doing super well. So focusing on low-income kids, but still doing very well through the pandemic. When we looked at those schools, and we would visit with those schools and say, what did you do differently that is making you more successful? Because a lot of schools obviously suffered a lot. And what we found with these schools is that they were over-communicating both with their students, but also with parents. They were really engaging with parents, and they would say, we were engaging with parents a lot more than we usually do. We were having ongoing conversations with parents on a lot of things, not only like where to find Wi-Fi and set up Wi-Fi, but how do you set up a computer and how do you get your kids to be engaged? These parents wanted to really be engaged with the teachers as sort of in this whole role of how do we make sure that our kids are successful. And parents, in many cases, had to learn the technology. And so schools were actually teaching parents how to learn the technology so that they could indeed help their kids. And this was something that we didn't see happening at many schools. But at those schools that were doing this, these were schools that tended to be pandemic-proof, breaking through. And the teachers, were telling kids, keep your cameras on. We're going to work together. We're going to be engaged. Because what we found at a lot of schools is, right, that kids would turn on would bring in on Zoom, they turn off their cameras, and they would really check out academically. But those teachers that were keeping the kids engaged, and I have to say, one of the things about these schools is that they were overwhelmingly elementary schools. And so it's much easier to do this at the elementary school level. But again, these kids, these are fundamental years for these kids. This was very, very important. And we also, as we looked at pandemic-proof schools, we were also able to see many schools that traditionally did very well in our rankings that took significant dips during the pandemic. And I remember looking early on, Memorial High School, which always does a pretty good job. But Memorial High School obviously had was impacted by the pandemic because scores significantly dropped. And there are a number of these high-performing schools around the state, like Memorial, that we saw things going wrong for them. When we looked in the Valley, this is where we saw the highest proportion of schools that seemed to be really re-engaged. And I think it's very interesting, right, that we have the highest level of poverty in the Valley of anywhere in the state. More low-income students than per capita than anywhere else. And yet, We see this high proportion of high-performing, high-poverty schools. We see this group of schools that are doing over and above, way better than than other schools during the pandemic. And it's just sort of this level of engagement, right, that continues to happen in the Valley. The other thing that we see in the Valley is that higher levels of teacher retention than any other areas of the state. So another sort of interesting thing that's happening there. Highest percentage of AP, IB participation, highest performing region of all campuses, and then of course the highest share of economically disadvantaged kids in the state. Some of you saw this in the New York Times, I think it was last week, where a guy from the Heritage Foundation, we can fight learning loss only with accountability and action. And he basically used the idea of what's happening in Houston, right, taking over the school district as a way to sort of instill rigor, talking about the TEA being much more rigorous. And I thought it was very interesting, right? It's certainly worthy of a read. But one of the things that we've seen happen, right, and this rule was just reversed yesterday, but the TEA was decided that they wanted to be more rigorous. And I think all of us can agree that we can be more rigorous in our schools. Obviously, we saw those reading grades, the math grades. There's a need for us to have more rigor in our schools. But I think one of the things the superintendent was like, you're changing, oh, there we go. You're changing rules in the middle of the game, right? How can you do this? And, if you're going after rigor, maybe we continue to change the rules. Maybe it's okay. But I think for me, though, what was the biggest thing is that there hasn't been any leadership on the part of the state, though, in saying, how do we get better? What are we going to do? We're going to put more money into the school, so we're going to have more rigor, but we're going to help you get there as well. And so it was just the sort of out of the blue, we're going to be more rigorous, we're going to grade you on it. Yes, we had a pandemic, but we're going to be more rigorous. And so the TEA saw the light and they said, okay, we're not going to be rigorous right away. We're going to hold back on this. And so that's probably a good thing. But I think all of us still want to see rigor, but we want to see leadership on the part of the state as we move forward. So I want to talk a little bit about, we spent a lot of time in Austin. And because we had this big 88th legislative session, I wanted to give you guys a snapshot into what political leadership did in response to COVID-19, and how did they really come into the charge to make sure that we can do everything possible to make sure that kids would be successful. And so they started off, right? We started off with this huge surplus in the state of Texas. $33 billion, you hear it over and over again. We had a surplus of $33 billion, and so some of us were like, wow, that could go into public education, that could go into early education, that could go into mental health. So many possibilities to help our future, right, in the state of Texas. This was a very unique opportunity for the state of Texas. And so we're just coming out of this health crisis, and so they did a couple of good things. One is that during the last session, we had extended Medicaid coverage for pregnant mothers to 6 months. And the federal government said, no, you either do none or you do 12 months. And so we passed a 12-month. And that's good because you say Medicaid coverage in Austin and people are like, no, we don't do Medicaid in the state of Texas. So we're one of only 10 states that doesn't have Medicaid, but we did Medicaid coverage for moms, right? And then in response to Uvalde, we did pass more money for mental health. And it's sort of this Faustian double that we have in this, the Faustian deal that we have in this state, which is every time there's a school shooting, we get more money for mental health. There's no real correlation, as most of you know, but we get all this money for mental health. And because we're 51st in access to mental health, we're happy to take it. The fact of the matter is these millions did nothing to change where we are positioned. It wasn't even close to being enough for us in regards to mental health services. Things that didn't pass, more coverage around Medicaid for kids, a pilot program to provide pregnant women with Medicaid nutrition assistance, so many things around health that did not pass in our state. There was, though, a lot of effort to get rid of all sorts of childhood vaccinations in our state, right? This is how we respond to COVID, is we decide to try to get rid of measles vaccinations in our state. Luckily, that didn't pass. When we look at early childhood education, so missed opportunities, things that didn't pass on one side, we had a lot of funding, again, for early education, missed opportunities on this. So a lot of funding that we wanted to get for early education did not happen. We would have created a grant program for pre-K partnership in classrooms, did not happen. But bills that did pass, professional development for childcare, and then we have a big ballot initiative going on in November, and this is a unique opportunity. It's Proposition 2. All of you vote, I know this, so you'll want to vote for Proposition 2, which is basically property tax relief for childcare centers that serve, private childcare centers that serve low-income kids, subsidized. And so this is Proposition 2. You'll want to vote on this. But what's most important is that for the very first time, childcare and children will be on the ballot, right? This is something that's going to be on the ballot for people to vote for, and our hope is that people get used to this idea of voting, they go out to vote, and then we'll see in Austin, and we think maybe in Houston, there's gonna be more initiative for the 24 election to focus on more money for childcare as well, which can only be good. The other thing that we saw a lot of during this legislative session was talk about vouchers. And we are, at Children at Risk, when you look at all the evidence, there's no way you could be for vouchers, right? There's just no way if you look at all the evidence. And you might like vouchers if your kids go to private schools, because the way this is set up, it's going to be a great subsidy for you if your kids are going to private schools. But for those, that 63% of kids that are low income, it's really not going to help those kids. And so, so this is one of the big things to come out, and we're going to have a special session that's probably going to happen as soon as this impeachment trial thing is over. We'll have this special session, and we're going to have to fight again on vouchers. The other big thing that came out of the money, this $33 billion, is this need to protect our borders, right? This is the federal government's job, but this is the protecting our borders, and so authorized use of drones. Also, in response to the pandemic, we're going to cut DEI services, we're going to prohibit gender-affirming care. These are the actions of our state legislature after coming out of this pandemic, coming out of this health crisis. After Uvalde, nothing on gun violence, and really not enough on mental health to have an impact. And so I bring these things up because it may seem, well, what is this? How is this related to COVID? Because this is how our state legislature reacted to a surplus and to emerging from the pandemic. And I'd always like to bring this up because you wonder, why does our governor spend so much time on the border and on immigration? And the fact of the matter is that our public leaders today are basically elected during primaries, right? The way everything's gerrymandered, it's all about the primaries. And so you have to be as far right, if you're a Republican, as possible. And when we look at polls of those voters care about immigration more than anything, border security and immigration and stemming the tide. And so our governor is really just reacting to the voters. And so until we have more people voting in the state of Texas, and things would change if more people voted. We have one of the lowest percentages of people voting in the nation, and so things need to change, or else we're going to keep going on with this type of leadership. But let me get to some of the policy priorities that will close the gap. And so as we look at what are the things that need to happen for us to get to this point where we're starting to reverse the impact of COVID, the COVID learning loss. And one of the things is time on task. For low-income kids, and kids coming from low-income families, time on task is a very important thing. How much time on academic task are you spending? And this can include high-quality after-school programs. This can include reading books. This can include spending time in the library. There are a lot of things that are sort of considered time on task. It doesn't have to be in the classroom, but it can be in the classroom. And if we wanted to really push this a little bit more, we would start saying, how do we institutionalize a little bit more of this time on task? And remember, parents want the time on task, right? Parents don't want to be sort of struggling, where am I going to put my kids after school? What's going to happen? Because they're working in Texas, especially this group, the 63% of families that are in this low income category. And so what are we doing to have more time on task? One of the negative results of a focus on time on task is that we see a lot of schools that decide to eliminate recess. And we think, that's a bad idea too, right? And I remember a couple of sessions ago, we wanted every school district to have a policy on recess because we really believe kids need to have that time to sort of stretch out and have physical activity. And we would walk into many offices and they didn't get the concept. And unfortunately, the only way we could get this concept over to them is like, what happens when you don't take your little dog out for a walk, right? They get mischievous and they chew things up. And that's when the light bulb, unfortunately, that's when the light bulb went on for a lot of legislators is, oh yeah, so we really need to get kids moving and active. And we did pass that piece of legislation, but because the author was a Democrat, the governor vetoed it. So there's still no school policy on school recess. But it's one of the unfortunate things that happens is that we in many schools, we eliminate recess as we focus on time on task. The other things that we can do to get kids back on track is, again, this focus on childcare and on pre-K. We need to make a much more concerted effort. The evidence is so clear on how you take pre-K, how you do it right, not the San Antonio way, but you do it the Valley way, you do it the way that it's done in Dallas and in Houston, and that's the way that you're gonna sort of get back on track. Early intervention, one of the things that we see is that when many schools set up these war rooms, right, or accountability rooms where they're looking at test scores on a constant basis so they know when a particular child has taken a drop in scores and they intervene immediately. So this early intervention, especially in light of the pandemic, is important. And then this idea of, we need to stop this idea that we're just moving on from the pandemic, right? People really want to move on from the pandemic. And I get it. All of us want to move on from the pandemic. But when it comes to our school children, we can't just move on from the pandemic. Time on task. This gives you an idea of how many days in school around the world people have, right? So Bolivia, one of the lowest, 160 days. Very close to the United States, 175 days in school. But look at the rest of the world, right? Significantly more, all the way up to China, 245 school days in a school year. And so one of the things that we like to say is that time on task isn't just a matter of, a long school day. It's a matter of how many days you're in school. And there's a lot more that we could be doing. We're at the bottom here, and the thing that keeps us there more than anything is that group of affluent parents or middle-class parents where maybe a mom or a dad doesn't work and they want the kids to be, they want a summer vacation for the kids just like they had. And they are the squeaky wheels, right? And they are like, let's keep the tradition going the way it's always been in the United States. Let's keep it this way. When the rest of the world is moving on and doing more time on task and doing a significant amount of work, more work. And this might be something we consider. I don't have any hopes of this happening in Texas anytime soon, but I think it's worth noting. Does anyone watch TikTok here? No one will admit to it, but a couple of so Dr. Freedy and myself are the only people on TikTok. I could see this. And so on TikTok or on YouTube, there's a lot of clips going on right now of Michael Moore's movie, Who Do We Invade Next? This is like 10 years ago he did this movie, but he looks at what's happening around the world. And he brings up Finland. And Finland is always, people love to talk about Finland in education circles because apparently Finland ranks #1 in the world in public education. And one of the great things about this is that they talk about how did Finland change? They did no homework, right? And so there really is very little homework in Finland. And when you hear this story, you think, well, that's the answer. If we don't do homework, we're gonna have the #1 education system. But what they don't talk about is some of the other things that are happening in Finland, right? So in Finland, this overemphasis on respect for teachers, paying teachers very well is one of the most prized professions to be a teacher in Finland. And the other thing in Finland, super emphasis on early education, right? Some of you have heard those little baby boxes, right? This comes out of Finland, this idea that the minute a baby is born, you're given a little baby box. And here's the other thing, is that in the Nordic countries, you get 18 months of maternity leave, right? To spend with your babies, sort of get it up and going. I remember I went to Sweden, and people love to show me around, like these are the things we're doing. And one of the women was pregnant. She was showing me around this early education center. And she said, well, in Sweden, we get 18 months. And my first reaction was like, how the heck do you guys do that, right? But as I thought about it, it's like, well, this is really good. This is good for mom and dad to really bond with the babies and get going with the babies. And so, so you have the same thing in Finland, this big emphasis on parenting, early education. And then the reality is that poverty does not exist in Finland in the same way that it exists in the United States, not even close. And so when you have a learning community, you can do no homework, and you can have this idea that you have a top-notch education system without doing homework. The fact of the matter is, in the United States, this time on task is very important. How are we doing? Homework is another way of doing more time on task, and so it becomes a very important thing. I'll go quickly through my final slides and then open it up to questions. But mental health, obviously, for us coming through the pandemic, seeing what's happening with immigrant students, seeing what's happening with gun shootings, there's just a lot of stress on our students these days. And so when we look at overall mental health access, we're 51 out of 51. When we look at Texas youth mental health, or we look at just mental health in youth mental health in Texas, number 41. When you look at counselors in our schools, many of them are doing other things besides counseling. I think one of the few places where we see real counseling is when communities and schools is doing some of the work. They're actually doing some nice work in there. So that's an important thing. I think the other thing that has emerged from the pandemic around mental health is that I see a lot of affluent white parents talking about this idea of all the cultural checkpoints, and this really affects the mental health of my child. They weren't able to go to the prom. And I get that that was a big deal going to the prom. But you know, if anyone's ever worked at Rice, you were a nerd, you probably didn't go to the prom anyway. So and it wasn't such a big deal. And I make light of this, but the idea is that there's so many bigger things going on in regards to mental health in our kids, as opposed to missing some of these cultural checkpoints. And the other thing is that, you know, we're not talking enough about this very large group of immigrant children in our state. You know, we spend a lot of time talking about the border, but the fact of the matter is that these are kids in our schools. Some school districts around our state, and I think HISD is one of them, do an extraordinary job of trying to integrate kids into the school system. But there are many school districts, and we have staff members in El Paso, and they'll say, oh, El Paso's doing nothing like what Houston's doing in terms of integrating immigrant kids into the schools. And so we see this going on all over the state, where kids are not really being integrated very well into the schools. And so, how am I doing on time, by the way, guys? Do we have any idea? Oh, I'm doing okay, okay. We can start by, things can change from, you know, within your independent school district. I mean, while the state legislature might not be able to change things, we can absolutely change things at the ISD level. And I think in many ways, there's a lot more enlightenment at the ISD level, by and large, than in other places. But I do have to say that this summer I spoke at the big TASB conferences, the Texas Association of School Boards. And I spoke to school board members about what I'm talking about today. And there couldn't have been less interest, right? They really weren't interested in this idea of moving on from the, you know, they were interested in moving on from the pandemic. They really didn't want to focus on it. It was sort of striking to me. I was so excited to talk to school board members from all over the state. And, you know, I would say that I had some Dallas ISD school board members that were super interested and came to talk to me afterwards. And there'd be the sprinkling. But by and large, it was like, yeah, okay. They weren't very interested. But there's a lot more potential at the independent school district. At county levels, there is an ability to do more around early education. We see that here in Houston and in Harris County, and there are a number of counties across the state that are really active in this. After-school programs, there's so much potential there. I think of the things that the Boys and Girls Club are doing, and things that Text Post organization in Austin in terms of coordinating with all of these after-school programs. There's so many good things that could be happening in after-school. And then also in parent education. They're just educating parents on how to engage their kids, I think is pretty important. But let me open it up to a couple. Do we have any questions, Sam? All right, very good. You want me to? Okay. So what policy initiatives should we prioritize into the next legislative session to impact student education? I think it goes back to this idea of really focusing on pre-K as being very important, really focusing on early education. But I think that if there was some mandate from the state that districts had to do pre-K, so we did a lot of work to get full-day pre-K funded for any district that wanted to do full-day pre-K and for low-income kids. And a lot of ISDs are really taking this tone of like, well, we're not ready to do it yet. And from a research perspective, you look at that and you think, you're basically leaving these kids behind, right? Because you really should, if you're looking at the data, you would be acting immediately to try to implement pre-K, full-day pre-K. And so I think about a number of years ago when schools across the state did not do school breakfast. And the U.S. Department of Agriculture came to us and said, how do we make sure that they do school breakfast? Because there's all this money. The federal government will pay for school breakfast, and yet superintendents are not doing it. And so we had to go to the state legislature and mandate school breakfast for any school that was over 80% low income. And so, it took a lot of cajoling, right? Because at first there was a whole group that was like, well, no, kids should eat breakfast with their parents, not at school. And some of you may recall that even in HISD, there was a big hullabaloo about, we don't think there should be free breakfast for every child because this will lead to obesity and two breakfasts. And there was a big article, I think it was in the New York Times, talking about school breakfast. And we were busy saying, well, no, kids can eat at home and they don't have to eat at school. And then the New York Times reporter interviewed a child, and they said, well, if food is offered at school and you've had food at home, what are you going to do? And the child's like, I'm going to eat it. I'm going to have 2 meals. And so it was just this. I thought that was funny, by the way. This idea that we're trying to say, no, it's not going to be so bad. And here's the child doing what every little boy would do. Yeah, I'll have 2 breakfasts, no big deal, right? So. But I think we were able to reframe it in such a way that everyone got this idea that we needed to have breakfast for low-income kids. And I think we're going to have to sort of try to figure out a way to reframe this idea of public education. So someone wants me to talk about my outlook about the state takeover of HISD. And then what is the evidence behind the idea that I alluded to, that ECE campus is not as beneficial as pre-K. This is the idea of the San Antonio. So, no, there's just been too many studies of this idea that the cohort, so that the teacher can teach to the whole cohort rather than the lowest common denominator. Yeah, here's my flight. But anyway, I think that there's too much you have to focus on the whole big cohort rather than, so I think what San Antonio is good, those kids are going to be fine, but they would be even better if they were in a larger cohort and can move into kindergarten together. HISD, and this has been talked about so much, and I think that, I knew Mike Miles when he was the selected superintendent in Dallas, and he was much like Terry Greer was in Houston, and some of the activist superintendents that we see in the Valley, which was, he was all about the evidence, all about trying to make changes and how to think outside of the box. The other thing that Miles did in Dallas was that everything he did, he didn't know how to spin it, and everything became a scandal, and everything became a big deal. And one of the things that I've talked about is that he really likes to sort of wallow in this idea that he's right and he doesn't care what other people think about. And so, in a sense, he's not going to be removed because he has this hand-picked board of trustees. The state is behind him. They want to see some of these new ideas work. And so, did we support the takeover? Absolutely not, because what really needs to happen in HISD is that the state needs to select a new leader that is not the state, the HISD, an elected board of trustees needs to select a new leader who could be a groundbreaking, bold person that we selected, that is voter selected in a sense, but that's coming here without the threat of having to leave, and I think that's the important thing. Oh, another one? I thought you were telling me time. Final question. What can we do to make legislators understand that a lack of education means crime in the future? First off, I grew up in Puerto Rico, so I do a lot of interviews with Telemundo and Univision. And one of the things that I always say is that people need to vote. Right now in our state, the groups that have the lowest percentage of people voting are Latinos and young people. And Texas does not make it easy to vote necessarily, right? We have the lowest percentage of the population that's registered to vote, and we have the lowest percentage of registered voters that actually vote. Both are in the bottom in the country. But you just have to look at the numbers to understand if Latinos voted and if young people voted just a little bit, everything would change in the state of Texas. And so sometimes I'm asked, why doesn't Children at Risk go after guns? Why doesn't Children at Risk, do more on this and this? And because at some level, as long as a lot of Republicans that are just focusing on their primaries are in office, none of that stuff is going to change. It's really going to come when we vote, right? When everyone votes that is truly representative of what the state is all about. And we're very close, right? And Texas doesn't have to become a blue state. Even if it's a thoughtful purple state, it would be better than it is today, right? And so this is the thing. When people ask me, what can we do to make legislators understand? First off, we have to put political pressure on them, right? Because all they understand is what's happening in their primary. They want to be reelected. And for a Republican legislator, they don't want to be primaried by the right. And so they will keep doing these things that really are counter to what serves the majority of our children and the majority of our families. We reframe the best we can because we know Republicans care about kids and we know Republicans care about families, and we reframe it. And we have a board that is in both parties. We have staff that's in both parties. We have supporters in both sides of the aisle. We work with both sides of the aisle, but I tell you, it's difficult in our state sometimes to get things done. But it doesn't mean we won't keep trying, right? We'll keep going at it as much as we can. So thank you guys very, very much for your attention today, and hopefully we learned a little bit. Thank you all very much.
Can I have the first panel come up, please? Thank you. Oh, chairs. They don't have chairs. Oh, sorry about that. Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us here today in person and online. And thank you, Dr. Bob. That was such a wonderful entrance to our conference here today. I'm Katerina Reyes, a research analyst specializing in child health policy here at the Baker Institute. I'm delighted to take on the role of moderator for this panel centered around early childhood education, which is a topic that is very near and dear to me. The COVID-19 pandemic has brought about an era of uncertainty and change, forcing us to adapt quickly to new realities. For our early childhood educators, parents, and most importantly, our children, this period has been marked by resilience, creativity, and a deep commitment to ensuring that learning and growth continue, even in the face of adversity. Today, we have gathered a panel of experts who have dedicated their knowledge, time, and efforts to understanding the effects of this global crisis on early childhood education. As we delve into this critical topic, we aim not only to acknowledge the difficulties, but also to celebrate the triumphs and resilience of our early childhood education community. Our goal is not only to understand the effects of COVID-19, but also to envision a brighter future for early childhood education, a future that is equitable, innovative, and responsive to the ever-evolving needs of our children. Through collective knowledge, determination, and collaboration, we can build a stronger foundation for our youngest learners and ensure that they continue to thrive despite the challenges that they have faced. I would now like to introduce our esteemed panelists. First, we have Dr. Erin Baumgartner. She is the director of the Houston Education Research Consortium at Rice University's Kinner Institute for Urban Research. In partnership with Houston area school districts serving over 700,000 students, teams under her direction are pursuing a research agenda focused on equity, opportunity, and access for students. Topics include early childhood education, social-emotional learning, post-secondary readiness, school choice, and teaching and staffing. We also have Dr. Ethan Hunt, and he had completed his PhD in exercise science at the University of South Carolina's Arnold School of Public Health in 2021, and was the Michael and Susan Dell Center for Healthy Living 2021-2022 postdoctoral fellow. Ethan's research include childhood obesity, prevention, and health disparities. Dr. Hunt has also begun to examine the impacts of trauma, particularly adverse childhood experiences, also known as ACEs, and how adversity impacts child health outcomes. Dr. Hunt is also an avid cyclist and enjoys trying new Austin restaurants with his wife, Whitney. And lastly, we have Dr. Tricia Zucker. She serves as the co-director of Children's Learning Institute, also known as CLI. In this role, she helps oversee CLI's strategic priorities to advance learning and health outcomes for all children in research development, clinical programs, and service delivery. Dr. Zucker's research interests include early identification and prevention of learning difficulties, evidence-based curriculum and instruction, family and school-based interventions, and early childhood assessment. Tricia is an expert in early literacy, language, and cognitive development. Her research focuses on children who are at risk for learning disabilities and experiencing poverty. I encourage our audience members to engage actively in this discussion, as the insights and recommendations that emerge today will undoubtedly shape the path forward for early childhood education in a post-pandemic world. Thank you for your participation, and let us begin this conversation by opening the first question up to all of our panelists. So, how has the landscape of early childhood education evolved due to the pandemic? And what are some of the most fundamental changes that you guys have seen?
I don't want to blow people's ears off with my obnoxiously loud voice, so I'll just say, as the health promotion person up on this panel, mirroring what Dr. Sanborn said, if you think about it with health and health outcomes, it directly mirrors that with achievement loss in academics with youth when you're examining COVID in youth populations. So in that context, my research focuses on what occurs with the removal of school settings, essentially during summer vacation times, which he also mentioned, and during COVID. So as this conversation goes forward, just think about it as, if you're thinking about health and health outcomes, specifically childhood obesity and mental ill health, all of those worsened during COVID across groups in child and youth populations. So that is my specific research focus. So in the context of the education setting on the panel, that will be what I focus on. So.
Sure. So I think, sorry. One of the big things that we saw as a result of the pandemic, particularly as it relates to early childhood education and public pre-K, is huge enrollment decline. So Dr. Bob talked about it a little bit, but really that's something that we've seen pretty widely, and it's not a challenge that's been experienced by students universally. So some school districts had huge enrollment declines in early childhood and pre-K participation, while other districts stayed even or had more growth in the numbers of children they were serving in the early childhood space. And so that has long-term implications for districts, not only the number of students they're serving, but the needs of students long-term. I really appreciated Dr. Bob's sentiment that we can't stop talking about COVID and pandemic and what it means for students, because especially for the youngest children, the ones who either had a partial year of pre-K or kindergarten or missed out on a few years of pre-K and kindergarten and started at first grade, there are longer term impacts of what that time out of school and the time and access to social and emotional learning and development means for those students in their academic careers long term.
I agree with what the other panelists have brought up, so I'll touch on a different topic, which would be the importance of school access and how parents value this in a new way post-pandemic. And I'll tell you a little story about my own family. My husband and I would sing, this little Christmas tune that you probably know, and Mom and Dad can hardly wait for school to start again, right? You think that every Christmas, don't you? You're like, gosh, these 2 weeks, whew, are we gonna make it back in January? And so that's certainly how every parent felt amidst the pandemic. When will schools open again? But that feeling is still with most parents. They have a greater value for just schools being open. However, quality is now of an utmost concern. And so that's really what a lot of our work focuses on, is ensuring the quality of early childhood care. The doors are open, but what's the quality of the instruction and the academic rigor, as well as the supports for social and emotional development that are really critical for these little guys. Teachers call them the COVID babies, and we don't really know what all happened during COVID, but social and emotional issues are at a higher level than have ever been reported before, not only in early childhood, but continuing in the elementary grades.
And I'm going to add one thing to what Tricia said. I think something else important for us to keep top of mind as we're thinking about learning in that early childhood space and quality is around teachers who have specific and explicit training in early childhood education and child development. When one of the things that we have heard from school districts over the years is on campuses when principals are making decisions about who's in the pre-K classroom, it's a teacher who maybe didn't hit the targets that we were looking for in 4th grade, and so they have to find somewhere else to put them, and they put them in pre-K. That means the children who maybe are the most vulnerable, these COVID babies, aren't necessarily with teachers who have explicit training in these really early developmental stages. The amount of growth and brain development that's happening in that 3-year-old, 4-year-old age is so vastly different than it is as students are older. And it's really important that the educators that are in classrooms with those kiddos understand that.
Thank you. I'm so glad that you guys have brought up social emotional learning. That's actually something that I'm, hopefully a champion for in early childhood education. So let's talk a little bit more about it. So social emotional learning, research has shown that it's linked to higher academic success, fewer behavioral problems, less emotional distress, and positive pro-social behavior. So how can we build a foundation of social emotional learning in our classrooms?
Well, I'm happy to start. So even pre-pandemic, many quality preschool centers, as well as elementary campuses, had social and emotional curricula. Teachers know that you've got to teach children words to describe that yucky feeling in their body, and how, when it's just a little bit of that feeling, we call it being frustrated with your friend, then you move into anger, and then that continuum might even move into rage, right? So for our youngest children, they're learning to name emotions. We're reading lots of books with social and emotional narratives that require conversation about, what do you think about the decision that this character made? So we've known this was important for quite some time to have social and emotional learning in classrooms as part of our explicit instruction. What I think has happened post-pandemic is that we are now thinking about this for teachers as well, because our social and emotional resources are tapped out for teachers. There's this vicious cycle that's happening where there's more and more demands on teachers ever since COVID, and many of these things have not gone away. Schools are not back to normal. Everyone's still pretty stressed, and this stress, for a lot of our early childhood teachers, presents as emotional exhaustion. And if it comes along with really demanding schedules, it turns into this vicious cycle of burnout and teacher attrition. Teachers are leaving the profession at unprecedented rates, and I'm not sure we've seen the full exodus yet since from COVID effects. But some of what our work currently focuses on helping teachers to become aware and mindful of their own social and emotional state, how their stress affects their ability to not only teach, but just to be present and be a responsive caregiver. So we're doing a lot more around mindfulness training, which I have a lot of thoughts about whether the mindfulness field is really ready for some of the effectiveness trials that are underway, but nonetheless, we're running studies. We don't know that they'll work, but we're doing these things because it's one idea that might help teachers to be able to not only support the things they already know are important for direct instruction in social and emotional, but think about their own self-regulation.
Tricia, if I may, I'm not from Texas, but I have lived in classically conservative states. How is SEL really received in Texas? Because I've seen some of the data on when you ask parents about SEL, I think they're fine with the constructs under it, but the titling and the image, some of the branding has really put parents off, I guess. But so how is that received overall in Texas?
It's a great question. Less well than in blue states. However, Texans are also just very pragmatic. So I think when we talk about problems related to behavior and discipline, parents listen, and parents are happy to be involved. So I think it's all in framing here.
And I think part of it is reflecting on the components that make up social and emotional learning, right? So especially when we're talking about the youngest kids, we're talking about being able to sit still and follow directions and keep your hands to yourself and listen to your teacher. And those are important components of social and emotional learning that happens in this kind of early childhood space that I think can resonate with people who might be put off by the phrasing of social and emotional learning.
Yeah, in Austin at the Michael and Susan Dell Center, we've just thought about reframing the title to that will, how will that fit better for Texans in general? And we've thought about that too, just to think about, what keywords really stick out to parents when you ask them. And I think one that stuck out to us when we talk about SEL is just, built this idea of building responsible youth. I think it's really received well in Texas because of just that terminology. So.
Great, thank you so much for giving us a comprehensive breakdown of social emotional learning. So this is also open up to everybody on the panel. How do we raise the profile that preschool is a comprehensive experience for children?
Maybe now more than ever, and maybe this is reflecting on what Tricia was mentioning, now that parents had preschoolers with them for an extended period of time, they can recognize the importance of skills and attention and things that children that are of that age need. But I think it's also connecting it to longer term outcomes. We know that when kids are participating in high quality early learning experiences, it has long-term impacts for them. We're not just talking about test scores as they're in third grade and when we start measuring, but thinking about things like their engagement in classrooms, behavior, attendance, long-term outcomes like employment and earnings can all be tied back to early learning experiences and how prepared kids are when they hit kindergarten. And I think not enough people make that connection that those early years, everything's building on each other, right? Learning begets learning. And so the more prepared kids are at that early stage, the better it will help them along the way.
Yes, thank you so much. This question is to Ethan. You touched a little bit about your research earlier, but can you very quickly go over the theories of the structured day environment and how can the structured environments be useful as an approach to improve the learning outcomes in early childhood education?
Yeah, so just briefly, the structured days hypothesis was formulated by a colleague of mine at the University of Central Florida. And basically what he posited was, schools really do a good job in relation to health and health outcomes. They get a horrible rap, I think, nationally when they talk about health and wellness, but when you're comparing it to the removal of school, i.e. a classic summer vacation, what is occurring during that 3-month window in comparison to that 9-month school month window with regards to health and health outcomes? And what we see across the board with childhood obesity and those obesity contributing behaviors, physical activity, sleep, nutrition, and sedentary/screen time is that they all get worse during the summer across populations. And of course, who experiences exacerbated or even worse outcomes is minoritized or vulnerable students and populations. So just like Dr. Sanborn was talking about the achievement gap in the summer slide, we see that mirrored essentially on a one-to-one basis with regards to obesity and obesity contributing behaviors, that obesity prevalence gets worse during summer vacation, and those behaviors all worsen as well. And at its very best, what was COVID to a school-aged youth? A prolonged summer. At its very best, it was just a prolonged summer. So if we already know that health and health outcomes get worse during the summer, and then we tack on multiple weeks and months with COVID, those gaps are even worsening, even more so than they were before COVID. And I liked what Dr. Sanborn said with removing this moving on narrative, because really we need to be able to better prepare for the next pandemic, because I'm sure this is obviously not over, and there will be other pandemics, I'm sure, that we will have to really try to focus on what is occurring to youth and children as a whole. So yeah, essentially just the structured days hypothesis posits, when you remove the school setting and the structured setting of a school, typical school environment, health and health outcomes worsen for kids, and that's exacerbated by the most vulnerable kiddos.
Thank you so much, Ethan. So the pandemic brought many challenges in early childhood education. However, it also exposed areas for improvement. What are some of the areas that you noticed were improved due to the pandemic?
Well, I think our flexibility with tech and utilizing technology with education, definitely, I'm sure if for the teachers in the room, and my wife was a teacher as well, there was a steep learning curve with how we incorporate class and curriculum at the beginning of the pandemic, but I think we did get better at it at the end. Again, there's probably still room for improvement, but I would say that's the one that sticks out to me, is how we deliver curriculum and classroom instruction.
I would say we do a lot of work in family engagement, and that certainly has continued to be improved since the pandemic. We have always said in early childhood education that parents are children's first and most important teacher, and that a role of a classroom educator is to partner with your child's parents, because they are the one teacher that will stay with them across all the grades, to advocate for them, to guide learning, and most importantly, be a responsive caregiver across all stages of development. So teachers have known this. Parents certainly felt it during the pandemic that they were a teacher, and they don't want to take on those roles long term. And yet we certainly still have a lot to learn about how to most effectively partner, where teachers and parents can work together. And we think about this in terms of sort of tailoring so that we equitably reach all families with the supports that they need to understand their role as their child's partner and teacher at home. And some of what I would say are still areas for improvement are trying to understand how can we best do some of what you're talking about, Ethan, help to structure the home environment. We want to make sure that we have routines in place that are aligned with your own family's unique culture and schedule, and yet those routines need to promote healthy sleep and routines for time to just speak without a device on, because that is one of the prime areas that we still need support, is to be able to find even 5 to 10 minutes each day to what we call unplug and tune in, so that parents and children can talk together. This is essential for early language development that promotes later literacy and really all academic as well as emotion regulation. So yeah, that's a long way to say parent involvement improved, and also we have a ways to go in terms of how schools can find that right amount of support that doesn't ask the parent to be a teacher, but does ask them to partner.
And I think one of the other things that the pandemic highlighted, for better or for worse, is that the role that schools play is way beyond education. Mm-hmm. And what we rely on schools to do is way beyond education, right? We're relying on schools to be a place where students have access to healthcare and food and aftercare and all these other developmental pieces that come with what we expect out of the school. But really, I think what the pandemic highlighted is an opportunity for us to think about how our community can play a bigger role in filling those needs. You know, school's main role is to educate children, but if a kid is showing up hungry, if a kid is showing up having had to move around a bunch of places and not have stable housing and hasn't had clean clothes in a week, these are all things that make it a lot harder for kids to learn, and we're expecting schools to fill those needs, and we can't. If we want schools to do the thing that we need them to do, we need to figure out how, as a community, we can help support these other needs, and really, I mean, at the bigger picture, not just meet these other needs that students have, but make structural change so families don't have these sorts of needs that we're talking about.
Yeah, I've started to think of schools as just like this overall resource hub for kids. Again, and that specifically highlights the most vulnerable kids, because I think that's where they can receive the most services. But it's tough because teachers, that's not their priority. Their priority is academics, because that is what, that is what their profession is. But it's really hard. That's why I always try to start with saying schools do a good job, and we put so much on teachers that we shouldn't. But when the school setting is potentially that resource hub, we're trying to put more on teachers just because we understand that that's the setting that we can intervene upon. But schools, it's just really hard to wrap our heads around. We want schools to do everything and act as this resource hub for kids, but teachers are already overwhelmed as it is. Again, my wife was a teacher, and scheduling of a teacher is insane. There's teachers in the room now. It's like, so how can we ask them to do more when they're already overwhelmed as it is? So it's tough, but I do think of it now overall as a resource hub for kids.
And one just thing to note is this is the last year of federal recovery funding for a lot of districts who have hired what they're calling wraparound specialists, or these FACE, Family and Community Engagement Specialists, where this is the one last school year with dollars to support these positions. So a lot of principals we're talking to are worried because it's the last year that they have a point person to be that hub and the referral network. There are great services available in Houston. Now, you get outside of Houston and it gets pretty dicey, but in our community, there's a lot of resources families can tap into with the right, essentially, liaison. And so I'm even more worried for next year when those positions, I don't think that you can rework your budget. I don't think principals can be that creative. They'll be choosing between a counselor or a wraparound specialist. Bad decisions here, right? Like, what can you do? You're choosing between two horrible options.
And then they're just going to ask a teacher to do more of that service that's been removed.
Yep.
So I'm hearing a theme that, it's kind of like the saying, it takes a village to raise a child. So in collaboration, how have you seen researchers, organizations, parents, and the child care providers just come together to improve early childhood education?
Well, I know, again, I'm not from Texas, but engaging with schools, there are districts and schools that are really interested in acting as what I call a resource hub for schools. Specifically, I am working with some folks in Seguin, in Seguin ISD, who are incredibly interested on this full-scale approach, full wraparound approach to early child care and child development and child education as a whole. So again, that's more in its infancy, but there are districts that are really beginning to buy into this idea of schools being a full resource hub for kids, especially the most vulnerable kids. So that's something I'm hoping to work on more in the future, but again, I think it's in its infancy at this point.
We partner with 11 school districts at the Houston Education Research Consortium. We partner with 11 school districts in the Houston region, and one of the topics that we did consensus building, and one of the topics that was really of interest to all of our partners was around pre-K and around who's participating and what enrollment declines have meant and who's getting access to pre-K, who has access to it in their neighborhoods where they live, and who has access to high quality early childhood education, right? So there are all of these things in Texas state laws around what counts as high quality early childhood education, but Texas is not supporting districts with the funding that they need to actually be offering high quality early education. And so I think one of the questions that we're trying to help districts understand is, where are the spaces where they're offering that, and how can we help them think about advocating for more resources to be able to offer those to students?
Yeah, I so agree that we underfund early childhood, and some of where we've seen creative community partnerships that essentially they bring in the resources through alternate funding routes is things like philanthropy right now is still doing some COVID-related learning loss projects. So for example, we're tutoring hundreds of kids in our area who are behind in reading, maybe due to COVID, maybe due to factors beyond COVID, right? About 20% of kids struggle with reading in the early years. But again, those projects wrap this year. It's all, so we'll have this gap, I believe, next year. We also have seen lots of really creative community partnerships, like through our museum. We have an incredible children's museum here in Houston, and they stepped it up to really get out into schools throughout the pandemic, and they've maintained a lot of their outreach efforts in ways that I just can't believe how they bend over backwards to get things like STEM into early childhood centers, even though this is not necessarily a priority in some of our schools that are just trying to get the math and the reading done. And yet again, a lot of these projects are ending. So, you know, thinking about how we sustain some of these new programs that have come along, and many teachers love them. Also, many district leaders, and I'm sure you could speak more to this, Erin, I think that it's very hard as a district leader to decide what community partnerships you're saying yes and no to right now, because as we all keep saying, teachers are overwhelmed. So if I'm a district leader and I'm gonna ask my teacher to do one more thing, even if it's a great thing, even if it's like, I don't have to do much, the Children's Museum Houston will come and put on an event for your families. But if I've got to stay after school 6 nights, I can't ask my staff to do that. They are too stressed out. So it's a very hard time to make decisions, even about community partnerships. And I think, do your district colleagues say those sorts of things?
Yeah,
It's like the good idea fairy is like, thank you for coming, but I can't put one more thing on their plate.
Well, and you know, even lots of organizations that have great programs in Houston know that we have a great relationship with the various school districts and say, we're just trying to get into this district and tell them about this thing that we have. We can even do it for free, but it's capacity and ability to engage with that. So yeah, paying for it is one piece of it, but even just capacity to take on one more thing is something that a lot of districts feel topped out with right now.
Thank you all. Let's see. I guess we'll get started on questions from the audience. So if anybody else has any questions that they would like to have asked, please let Sandy over there know, and she'll pick it up for you guys. Let's see. What are ways to engage parents, especially when they are facing so many stressors themselves?
I'm happy to take this one. So we take a tiered approach with 3 tiers. Tier 1 is universal supports, where everyone comes to the kind of family engagement events I just alluded to, where Children's Museum or your classroom teacher has fun activities around the room that we can model for you how to support learning in playful ways at home and do the most important thing with young kids, which is talk to them. Talking is teaching. So that's universal messaging for families, along with, you know, you might send families activities and ideas that they could playfully learn even as they clean up, like how to make Simon Says into a cleanup game. Tier 2, that type of support is a little more targeted for kids who we have some concern about their school readiness, or they have other risk factors due to poverty, immigration, whatever it might be. We try to make sure that we have a few touch points with those families where we can do this as staff. We support many classrooms in our region to have touch points where we just have individual calls with families and say, look, here's a resource where you can learn about how to integrate book reading into your family routine. Let's set an achievable goal for this. Or how to find those 5 minutes each day to unplug and tune in, talk to your child. And so that would be more of a tier 2, to set a few goals with a few online resources for families. And tier 3 would be more intensive supports for families with substantial risk. And we have lots of intervention programs that are ongoing ways to partner with families in ways that, again, parent sets the agenda. It's their unique family culture, their goals that need to be set. But what we can do as a coach is help you to set those goals, reflect on your parent-child interaction through playback of video, taped parent-child interaction. So those are some examples. There's lots of other ways that schools like to partner with families, but that's,
With your programs, are they identified through the school?
yes.
Yeah, so it's, most.
School is the hub.
It's that,
Yeah.
it's that hub that we think about.
Yep.
So this question says, who is doing early childhood well? How can we mimic those practices in more schools? So I guess are there any model schools or programs that you guys would like to highlight?
Are there particular ones you have in mind?
I have so many schools that I love. So I'll pick a few of my favorites, but this is by no means comprehensive, even in our Houston region. I will say, Yes Prep has opened some really innovative early childhood campuses that are attached to their, what used to only be middle and high school campuses. Part of what makes their approach really wonderful is not only rigorous academics, but a lot of family partnership. A different theme around excellence would be an A-Leaf ISD. What you see happening there is not only rigor in their more standard elementary schools that have pre-K attached, but also some early childhood campuses where they are experimenting with major changes to the environment. The classroom environment looks like a museum. You walk in, and for 4 weeks, you might be in the dinosaur classroom. And then in the next 4 weeks, you move to a classroom that looks like outer space. And why are they doing this? It's all about talking as teaching. Again, this idea that I need really rich background knowledge to be built for these kids. And most of their learners don't have experiences outside of school that would let them go to NASA or let them experience a trip to the coast. So they can go to a classroom and they can sort of be immersed in a place that it looks like I'm at the ocean. So those are a couple of creative ideas that are different themes, but there are many excellent pre-K programs here and elsewhere. And I don't know if Dr. Bob's still here, but I've seen some good early childhood classrooms in San Antonio ISD too. So.
Well, and if it helps, I mean, when we're thinking about what a high quality early childhood classroom looks like, we're talking about small class sizes, low student to teacher or low student to adult ratios. We're making sure that the lead teacher has training in early childhood, and any assistant teachers in those classrooms have an early childhood background as well, something like a child development associate's degree. We're talking about making sure that students have access to the kind of wraparound support, so food and vision and health screenings and those sorts of things, that they're in classrooms where the curriculum is developmentally appropriate. These are the kind of structural characteristics we're looking for and trying to see where high quality classrooms exist.
Have we thought about, how you take those successful programs and roll them out into, under-resourced, not even under-resourced, just, programs and settings that don't have any programs? Like, what makes a successful project or program? How can we implement that in other settings?
This is our passion at the Children's Learning Institute. We have a flagship program that's been around for more than a decade called the Texas School Ready Program, and we work exclusively now with those subsidized childcares. We used to work with districts, but they don't need us anymore. So we go out to places where there isn't a hub, there isn't a wraparound specialist, and then we work to systematically, over a 3-year period, get to the level of quality Erin's describing, because you can't do that overnight. You're going to need multiple years where you start with some foundational professional development, put curriculum in place, make sure you've got good screening assessments for kids, and bring a coach in to support and ensure that learning is happening, not only for the teachers, but we also support the administrator, because the administrator, these are mom and pop shops most of the time, and they need a lot of support as well to understand their business model and how to make this work without that high teacher turnover. So yeah, I think it can be done, and yet it also, subsidized childcares, they need that continued support to ensure quality and not just, address the desert, but let's open the doors, let's get access to childcare that's really high quality.
And Tricia said administrators, which also kind of nudged me to mention that even in the kind of traditional public education space in elementary schools. We need to make sure that the administrators in elementary schools understand the importance of early childhood and understand the importance of pre-K, so that they're putting their highest quality teachers in those spaces, so that they're making sure those classrooms have the resources and supports they need. So it's not just, I can absolutely see how supporting administrators in the subsidized childcare space is helpful, but also in the public pre-K space, we need to figure out how to support administrators in understanding that importance.
I think programs such as Texas School Ready is so important. When I started my early childhood education journey, I was like a floater teacher, so a substitute teacher, and we didn't have these programs that, we have a coach come in and help you learn. I kind of just learned on the fly was how I had to get through the day. And thankfully, I had really good colleagues and amazing co-teachers to be able to support me, but there are so many schools out there that don't have the same support system. So thank you so much. So this question is a little tricky, and it's towards Ethan. So how do you balance the evidence on structured day hypothesis with the evidence of unstructured play, which suggests that unstructured time may attribute to better mental health, increased sense of agency, and improved independent problem solving?
Yeah, I think obviously we need both. Again, my work, I was only focused on the structured days hypothesis, so the free play is not essentially in my research expertise, but I do know that it's important. But highlighting, I always think about who's getting left behind, or the most vulnerable population that will possibly get left behind with regards to the removal of structure. And so, that to me outweighs aspects of, not total aspects of free play, but I just think about what you're weighing when you're comparing the two, and I do just think that summer vacation is so important, that summer break is so important for structured settings, as we mentioned, both internal and external, or in the home and in the school setting for kids. And you can have structured periods of free play, I would say.
Oh,
right?
yes.
You can structure that around a child's day to say this is a free play period, or an unstructured period that they can explore on their own, of course. But under the whole, it's still under that umbrella of we're having these structured adult-led settings that I think is totally important. It is a tricky question because it's like they sound so opposite, but I think they really can complement each other with regards to health and health outcomes.
Absolutely. I remember as a director, we would always tell the parents, please follow our schedule that we have in the classroom, because over the weekend, during the week, we always try to keep the kids on schedule, and that's very important. So, thanks, Ethan. Okay. Are you all paying any attention to the public Montessori programs, and how has this approach to early childhood education impacted ECE? Oh, I'm guessing maybe like the Bezos Academy, is that what this question came from? Okay.
We're doing work in Montessori classrooms in HISD, which maybe that's what you're imagining, and in those classrooms we're doing things that supplement Montessori very nicely, again around this idea that conversations are so important. So a lot of our work there focuses on coaching teachers to do what we call Strive for 5. That means rather than a typical 3-turn conversation that you see in a lot of early childhood classrooms where teacher asks a question, child responds, teacher says, good job, we extend that into at least 2 more turns where teacher keeps the conversation going to 5 turns. This already aligns very well with Montessori, and yet the jury is out if you want to know, is Montessori effective broadly, right? So my kids all went to Montessori preschool. I love it personally for little kids. But the jury's out. There's not good effectiveness trials on this. The few studies that have been conducted show greater benefits for middle-class children than for low-income children. The authors of some of these well-conducted randomized controlled trials hypothesized it might have something to do with self-regulation skills that children entered the classroom with. They didn't have great data on this, and so I think this is an area where more research is needed, because there's a lot of compelling features to Montessori, but we don't know if it's effective and for whom it's effective for, and we also don't know how well it can be scaled, because basically what happens with Montessori is when you put it into public schools, it's not really Montessori anymore, and it's also not really following some of the district guidelines because they have different assessment principles and so forth. So you kind of make a lot of adults unhappy. So the jury's out.
Thank you. I had the pleasure of being able to work in a Montessori school and a Reggio Emilia school, and there's so many different philosophies out there, and there's not like one that fits every child because every child is different. So to parents that are choosing like what kind of school they should put their child in, just look at see like how they learn, and then you should put that into consideration when you're choosing your preschools. Okay, so this looks like this is going to be one of the last questions. So following up on Dr. Zucker's comment, the child tax credit ended and child poverty doubled. We are also looking at the end of SNAP benefits. So how do these affect the schools?
I'm actually thinking Erin might want to go first, because this is a lot of your area.
Well, I mean, this is kind of thinking back to what we've been talking about around wraparound needs and student support needs and basic needs that kids have. Kids who are showing up hungry can't learn. Kids who are showing up not having been able to sleep somewhere stable for the last few nights can't learn. And so when we think about the needs that families have and students have in these spaces, it's imperative that we figure out how to make sure that families have access to these supports and really figure out how do we need to get to the place where we're not so reliant on these things to get families the supports they need. So how can we make sure that parents are earning living wages and that, housing is affordable and transportation is available and groceries are affordable? How do we make the structural changes to make that happen so that we're not relying when one policy change happens that it's going to blow up what opportunities exist for families?
Yeah, I totally agree. And, as individuals, there's not much we can do about a lot of these federal and other recovery dollars ending. They did have to come to an end at some point, and yet it's going to be hard next year is part of what I predict, because there's just going to be less money. Dr. Bob mentioned something that we probably all agree on, that we could better use some of our federal dollars that flow through early childhood education and TWC to support quality and to support more of these services that folks have gotten used to them being in their schools. And schools are a pretty good place to have a hub because the kids and families come there. Families don't always get out of their cars anymore. That's another funny, post-COVID thing. So they might come in and they might not. But anyway, we're also trying to figure out how we can run interventions from the carpool line. But I think, so collectively thinking about speaking to policymakers and those sorts of things is important. But individually, there's never been a more important time to say thank you to teachers. And someone mentioned this already, to celebrate, but gratitude too. Gratitude for the little things that these early childhood educators do every day. It couldn't be more important right now, because that's ultimately why these teachers are there. They love these kids in these communities. And if you can go out of your way to say thank you for something specific, it means tons. So I'd say you should all grab your phone right now and email someone in early childhood to just say a quick thank you, or text them, whatever.
Yes, please do that. As an early childhood educator in a previous life, if I get a message from one of my families, or even just donuts in the morning, it just really brightens up our day. So as we bring our discussion to close, I want to express my heartfelt gratitude to our esteemed panelists, Drs. Ethan Hunt, Tricia Zucker, and Erin Baumgartner, for generously sharing their insights with us today. I would also like to extend my appreciation to my colleagues, Dr. Sandra McKay and Dr. Christopher Kuleza, who was unable to be here with us today, unfortunately, and our planning committee for their invaluable guidance and collaboration in putting this wonderful event together. And a special thank you goes out to our friends, family, and fellow education advocates both in the audience and online, for joining us today. Together, we aspire to envision a brighter, more equitable future for early childhood education and to strengthen the foundation for our youngest learners. Thank you all for your unwavering commitment to the future of education. We will now take a break for lunch and reconvene our second panel discussion on teacher stress and support at 12:15. Thank you all so much.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to bring us back for our afternoon panels, especially welcoming our folks that are observing us online. Thank you for rejoining. For those who don't know me, I am Sandy McKay. I am the Huffington Fellow here at the Baker Institute for Public Policy, and I am also an associate professor in pediatrics with the University of Texas Health Science Center at Houston. And I am excited to be introducing our second panel today. If you are looking at the agenda, I am not Dr. Koleshka. He is unfortunately not able to join us today, so we will be having a little bit of a deviation from our agenda today. But I hope to be able to live up to his expectations as well. Teaching is understandably among the most stressful professions in the United States. Research from nonprofit and research organizations, including the RAND Corporation, demonstrates that teachers report twice the level of stress as the average working adult. Indeed, teacher stress levels verge on similar levels to healthcare professionals such as nurses and physicians. Among all teachers, Black teachers are significantly more likely to report burnout. The drivers of teacher stress are multifaceted and complex. On a daily basis, teachers are expected to ensure the excellence in learning and look out for mental well-being of their students. They must regularly balance the interests of school administrators, parents, students, and policymakers while working long hours with oftentimes limited resources. Teacher stress was further exacerbated during the COVID-19 pandemic, where teachers had to grapple with quick transitions to online learning while prompting significant changes in curricula. Further, the public attention is usually turned towards addressing student stress, leaving relatively few discussions around teacher stress. This impacts teacher stress on the American education system are often widespread. Between 30 and 40% of teachers leave the profession within the first 5 years. The impacts of teacher stress are often felt by children. Previous research shows that schools report higher level of teacher stress are more likely to experience lower levels of student achievement. I'm excited to invite our panel speakers today up to the front so that we can engage in a very robust discussion. What you'll see today to my left, we have Mr. Kenneth Brantley II. He is a native of Shreveport, Louisiana, and has served the greater Houston area as an educator for the last 15 years. His education career began in Aldine ISD as a teacher, coach, assistant principal, and mentor for 8 years before joining Team HISD in 2015. He has served the Houston ISD community for the last 7 years in the role of principal, program manager, and the school's office director. His mother, Brenda, is a retired educator, and his father, Kenneth, is a retired businessman. His wife is a school counselor, and Mr. Brantley and his wife are proud parents of a rising third grader. Mr. Len Brogan has been in education for 29 years, and 26 years of those with Fort Bend ISD. He was a middle school and high school teacher and a coach for 12 years before becoming an administrator. After serving as an assistant and associate principal for 6 years, he is in his 11th year as a principal, serving for 3 years at Sugar Land Middle School, and now his 8th year as principal of Ridgepoint High School. He has led the school through a large enrollment increase, natural disasters, and the COVID-19 pandemic. He believes every student deserves an empowering and caring teacher in their classrooms. He has an undergraduate degree from St. Joseph's University and master's degree in education and supervision from the University of Houston. Mr. Grant Grantquist is an assistant principal at Tomball Memorial High School in Tomball ISD. He previously served as an assistant principal at a Title I junior high school in Tomball ISD. He's special education, emergent bilingual, discipline, and at-risk student issue resolutions are his specialty areas of interest. He is accustomed to working with diverse socioeconomic and demographic segments. He has worked to implement campus-wide professional learning communities to support the best top-tier initial instruction focused on closing gaps. Mr. Grantquist is passionate about closing gaps and supporting teachers using research-based best practices. Mr. Grant holds a master's in education from the University of St. Thomas and a bachelor's in education from Sam Houston State University with an emphasis in special education. He is working on his doctorate at Baylor University in educational leadership and preparing a dissertation on using restorative justice to support the needs of students diagnosed with emotional disturbance. Ms. Melissa Womack is a current AVID coordinator at Ridgepoint High School in Fort Bend ISD and is also a staff developer for the AVID National. She holds a bachelor's degree in education from Texas A&M University and a master's degree in educational leadership administration from Lamar University. Over the last 15 years, she has taught AVID and English courses both at middle and high school levels. In 2012, she was named as a Campus Teacher of the Year and District finalist at Killian ISD and as a 2016 Teacher of the Year finalist at Baines Middle School in Fort Bend ISD. Along with teaching, she has served as a NJHS sponsor, an academic team leader, an AVID coordinator, and an AVID National Demonstration School coordinator. This is really exciting. We have really amazing folks that are here today. So I'm going to join our panel down here, so I'm not at the big podium. Thanks, guys. I'm really excited to be sitting with y'all because y'all are just so amazing people. So talking about teacher stress, a lot of what we've heard and what I've kind of read out to the audience before really feels heavy and overwhelming when you start thinking about it. What is it that you are hearing from the teachers? What are they telling you are some of the common factors that are contributing to the stress? And this is open to anyone in the panel.
Well, I'll go ahead and begin. First of all, thank you for the opportunity to speak here today. Really appreciate the invite. Again, Kenneth Brantley, I'm principal of Margaret Long Wisdom High School in the Houston Independent School District. We sit on the southwest side of HISD in the Sharpston-Gulfton area, the most densely populated area in the city of Houston. I'll say that for most teachers, when I have conversations, the things that contribute to stress are, believe it or not the things so much in the classroom. The things in the classroom, the students, the curriculum, instruction, this is why they're in the profession for kids. It's more of the external factors, the things that sometimes we as educational leaders and policymakers put on teachers when maybe it could be something that we can take off of their plate. Like, for example, teachers want time to be able to collaborate. Teachers want time to be able to share ideas and plan, just something as simple as planning time, uninterrupted planning time. Something like that goes a long way. And what I've also found too is when they're working really hard, sometimes just being acknowledged of what they're doing and that it's having an impact, because there's such a focus on achievement, such a focus on accountability, particularly here in the state of Texas. But what we find is that teachers are not in this for really a lot of accolades or public praise, but just that those that they're working with and around recognize and appreciate their work and can show it in very tangible ways. But when we ignore that, or we just assume that they're coming and they're going to do their work and it's not important that they're recognized. I mean, just something as simple as saying, hey, I noticed that yesterday this was happening and I noticed you made a shift. Maybe you took some coaching and feedback, or you all made an adjustment in planning, and I can see the impact. Like, I appreciate that. That goes a long way. I mean, little things fuel teachers. So I think we just need to work on some of the external factors, recognizing and appreciating their work, making sure they have the time to be highly effective, to plan, and also community engagement. Community engagement is something I think that really contributes to a lot of stress to teachers as well, because they want to engage with families. They want to engage with their parents. They want to be able to have opportunities to do so. But if we don't create those avenues for them, those opportunities, and support them, as administrators, sometimes that can be stressful as well.
I agree with what Kenneth said. When you think back on it 3 years ago during the pandemic, teachers were being celebrated. There were parades for teachers. They were just being so held up as being just great people for what they were doing. And now, just 3 short years later, I feel like they think that the burden is on them to close that gap that COVID presented. And they're doing it on their own with, being underfunded, underpaid, and undervalued. So I think all of that leads to them just feeling that they need to they need to do more and more and more each day to reach out to kids, and it's kind of overwhelming for them. So and it's tough, and I think we need to get back to I think it was Dr. Zucker who mentioned about celebrating the teachers for what they do and giving them a lot of accolades and a lot of praise as much as possible.
I think both these guys have said a lot of hit the nail on the head with a lot of things they've said. I like what you just said. During the spring of 2020, teachers were celebrated like war heroes. I mean, we nurses and teachers were like the number one thing we celebrated. And then after, as everything progressed, it quickly, teachers kind of fell off. And that's something that, I think definitely hurt us, as educators a lot. But one of the things I know that COVID really showed us, and it showed our teachers, is I think, our teachers were stressed before COVID happened. Their cups were full. When COVID happened, their cups started overflowing. And that was a big thing, is it opened our eyes to, teacher stress, teacher, issues. What could we, take off their plate to support them? And we've learned a lot, I think, and there's a lot of positives that we can, come out of this and say, teacher mindfulness is something that we need to focus on. Teacher stress, giving teachers time, like Kenneth said, is something that I think we could all agree on. That's kind of come out of this, along with all the technology and stuff.
Hi, everyone. Thank you also for having me. It's very refreshing to hear administrators talk about that they are recognizing that teachers are overwhelmed and that we need support. Because as the only teacher on the panel, the one that's in the trenches with the kids, it's really refreshing to hear that administrators see what we go through every day and acknowledge that we are overwhelmed. So when thinking about this particular topic, I wanted to reach out for some feedback because I felt like I was representing teachers everywhere. And I wanted to find out what really was stressing out teachers. Because we know teachers are stressed, but there's a lot of whys. And so I reached out and asked, and a lot of teachers were kind of too stressed to give me feedback, I think, or they didn't know where to start, right? And so I started listening. I started listening around our building, and I started listening to my colleagues. And don't get me wrong, the culture on our campus is great. It's very positive. I've worked in 4 campuses in my 15 years of teaching, and this is the most positive campus I've ever worked at. And so we have a really positive culture, but teachers are overwhelmed, as you've heard them say, and everyone today. Teaching was an overwhelming career path prior to COVID, and then COVID happened, and more has been added. More has been asked of us, as you've heard them say, not only from legislatures and administrators who have those people that are putting more on them than they put on us, but also from parents and from kids who are expecting more of us. They're expecting us to close that gap, and they're expecting us to meet them where they are, because we should. And so, we have our problems that were always there, things like, planning time and having to take grades home and do work outside of school. Having less than 30 minutes for lunch uninterrupted sometimes, not being able to go to the bathroom when we really need to sometimes because we can't leave our classes unattended. Things like that always cause stress. But now on top of that, we have a huge mental health crisis in our schools with kids who spent a lot of time at home and got very accustomed to a certain way of learning, and then now are coming back and having to readjust. It's taking a huge toll on their mental health this year, or not this year, we're kind of close in, but last year I had 4 students, I teach juniors and seniors, had 4 students that were hospitalized for mental health within the year because they just were overwhelmed coming back into a traditional school setting. And as teachers, we want to support them, right? We want to support them, but also we have a job to do that we have to make sure gets done, and that we are closing that gap and still getting through all the curriculum that we need to, and we're supporting our kids. But then what also has to play into that too is that we are humans, and we have a personal life, and we have things going on outside of school. I have small children, and my husband went from having an office job to working at home, and there's kind of a disconnect there and stress level with what I do. And anyhow, and then parents got to see their kids at home, and they got to see how they learn, and they recognized that some of them had some needs to be fulfilled with 504s and special education. And so now our numbers in 504 and special education are rising, which is an underfunded thing. And we have a lot of things that have come about just since COVID. We have budget cuts. People have been cut off of our campuses, which has made more work on teachers and counselors and principals. We have to go back and teach basics in our math classes and our writing classes. Reading comprehension skills are lacking because of all this with COVID being out of school. And we're going back and we're teaching basics. And then on top of that, our curriculum to meet those EOC and state testing standards. And so I have a list and I could go on, but I'm gonna just stop talking right now. Go ahead.
Well, there's so many different priorities that are there, right? Certainly I'm hearing things like, just trying to get through the day, right? Trying to have the teachers get through the day, trying to make sure that they're meeting the needs of the students, meeting parent expectations, meeting administrator expectations. And then for the administrators that are here, I'm sure that there's those competing priorities between, making sure that you're meeting your teachers' expectations, but also your boss's expectations, your legislators' expectations, your school board's expectations. How do you balance all the competing priorities that are in front of you?
For me, it's you got to think about what's best for students at all times first, and put that as the first priority. Safety is obviously the biggest thing on your mind each and every day. After that, it's making sure that there's an engaging, empowering, quality teacher in each and every classroom. And you can only do that, teachers can only do that if they're in their learning brains. If they're stressed, they're gonna go to their survival brain, and it is not gonna be an effective way for our kids to learn. So I think that taking as much off the plate as Kenneth was talking about, as much off of teachers' plates as possible that we can, is the best thing that we can offer them. Unfortunately, I can't pay them more. I can't offer them any additional funding, but we can give a resource of time back to them, and that's what I personally try to strive towards. We have very little, if any, faculty meetings. There's other ways to disseminate information. We have professional learning days embedded in, and as Kenneth was saying about the time for them to plan, that's what they want. They want to be able to get into their classroom, sit down with the teachers that they teach with, and plan lessons that are going to be powerful for kids. And so as much time that we're able to do that's what we do.
That to Lynn's point, the resource of time I found is one of the most valuable gifts that we can give teachers. Time to take care of administrative needs, instructional needs, and to that point, also helping them and protecting them from things that compete for their time, interest, and try to keep the main thing, which to your point, Lynn, the safety aspect of campuses in schools and classrooms, and being able to focus on high quality teaching and learning, and being able to have the supports in place to be able to do that. That's so helpful. And one thing I've also, to the time point, last year on my campus, we did not have the luxury of being able to build into our master schedule planning every day for our teachers. Well, this year we were able to make it work in our master schedule, and just that alone, being able to have planning every day, has been a game changer for just the feel and the mood on our campuses. So just to accentuate that point of time is so helpful when it comes to teachers and helping with the stress that they have to deal with day to day, so that they can keep the main thing with everything that's competing for their interests, with everything that's competing for our interests. And I'll also say another thing that we adopted this year as a mantra is that we will not give mandates without models. A lot of times, leaders, administrators will give mandates to teachers, and they'll say, hey, this has to be done, and have not demonstrated and shown them what that quality and what that excellence looks like and what the expectations. So unclear expectations, unclear communication also leads to stress as well with teachers. So in the classrooms, my administrators and myself, we're in modeling and supporting and co-teaching and co-planning with our teachers. And that also helps to lighten the load as well, where my leader is right here with me helping to resolve these problems in something that I've typically done by myself or with my planning team. Now my leader is also helping and bringing in resources and assisting and providing models. So couldn't underscore that enough. That's hitting it right on the head.
I want to piggyback off that. I'm sorry. I love that. I love that that's the priority. And Fort Bend ISD this year, in the last 2 years, we've had a lot of training at our in-services that's taken away a lot of that planning time. Well, Fort Bend this year gave us back that time to plan, and it was a complete game changer. Our teachers felt more prepared going into the first week and the first 9 weeks of school. The excitement around going back to school was much higher. I love the way that you say, we're not going to expect something without giving a model. We have seen that on our campus. We asked our teachers to use engaging strategies in the classroom, and we've given them lists, and we've given them resources to go and see what those strategies are. But one of the ways that we have changed professional development on our campus over the last couple of years is actually putting teachers into the activity that we want them to use in the classroom and having them do that activity with fidelity while we're training them on campus things. So that they get to see how those strategies look, and we are seeing a huge increase in the rigor and engagement that's going on in our classes with our teachers, because they've actually been able to go through that model and see what it looks like in their classes. So I wanted to piggyback on that. Thank you.
One of the things that we did as a district is we dedicated full days to working, letting our teachers have time to work without giving them like, we're not going to have PLCs, we're not going to have time, faculty meetings. Faculty meetings is over. I think, as most people could agree, that a lot of the stuff that goes on in a faculty meeting can go into an email and be just as effective. That was something that I think we learned quickly. But giving that time to the teachers, and when we say time, it has to be their time, not it's their time to do what they want to do related to their jobs, is crucial. Moving forward, it's something that it gives them the flexibility to do what they need to do and take care of business.
Excellent. I love the idea of like, could this meeting have been an email, and then just be like, check. I challenge that to myself whenever I call a meeting and just say, could this meeting have been an email? And if I'm like, yeah, I'm like, that didn't go so well, did it?
Most of them can.
At least you're fact checking yourself.
To that point, even just providing a virtual option. Like just the other day, we had a meeting, and it was for around appraisals and different things like that. And typically we would have that meeting face to face, but we had a virtual option. I can't tell you how many texts and emails I received. Thank you for allowing us to do this virtually, right? So just even taking advantage of some of the platforms that we now have access to since COVID.
Absolutely.
hate to say it, just the amount of time to walk down the hall from my classroom to your office, to sit down, to talk, and then walk back. I mean, that's valuable time, so yeah, that's awesome, sorry.
Absolutely, and it's just giving back that gift of time that you guys have been talking about, and it really is a gift, that you can give people. And then, looking at these strategies, it sounds like you guys have been starting to implement some very school-driven strategies, but what other school-driven strategies have you looked at to address mental well-being of teachers? What have teachers communicate have been those most impactful ways to address those concerns for their mental well-being?
I think one of the things that, with everything that happened, I am not a trained psychologist or counselor or anything like that, but just giving teachers and encouraging them to come in and talk to you, and having that open door policy to say, your problems are my problems, and let me help you solve it and get through it. I think that was something that we really, I really focused on, to give people just time, but time with me to work with you.
Yeah, for us, the district has added some things like telehealth type things and different resources for teachers. But as Grant was saying, I think it's, we ask our teachers to build solid relationships with the kids, and it's our job to do the same thing with our teachers. So being active listeners and knowing that they're being affected by a lot of things, and having that grace and that empathy for them. During the pandemic, we did partner with a group called Minding Your Mind out of the Northeast. They have young adult speakers that come out to schools and work with schools, and we've did sessions with just our staff members and such. So, but I mean, on a day-to-day basis, the best thing to be is just a good listener. Know our teachers, and know those that might be hurting, because it's still going on, and it's still affecting people, and our teachers we have a large number of teachers that are pulled in many different directions by things that have been said, special education 504, just the mandates that are out there, and they're having to manage their time to really put the big rocks, which is, everyday teaching at the forefront.
I want to go back to something Mr. Brantley said earlier too about teachers want to be recognized. We have an award that we give out every month on our campus called the Crystal Apple. And prior to COVID, it was done with Fidelity every month. And we look forward to celebrating our colleagues. And we get to nominate teachers, parents, students get to nominate teachers, so it's nominated by the community. And then when COVID happened, it kind of went away. And even when we came back into class, it was like every couple of months, we'd be like, oh yeah, we haven't given that in a while. And the teachers were starting to go, where did that go? Well, we're now back doing that with Fidelity. But that was just one of the things that we were kind of like, we've pushed that to the wayside. And now, like I said, we're getting that back, but the teachers noticed. And one of the things that our campus is doing this year, and really Mr. Brogan started it a couple of years ago, kind of like a sunshine committee that's just designated to just things that make teachers happy. So a couple of years ago, he started a treat trolley where they just come and push the little treats through the hallway, and it's like, hey, come get a soda or a snack or something. And it's just like a break, and it's also like a way that we know admin is saying thank you. It's that way of recognizing and saying, we know that you guys are doing a good job, and here, let us treat you for the day and give you a little bit of a brain break too, to enjoy something sweet. And this year they've started doing food truck Fridays, and there's popsicles in the fridge and all the, just the lighter things. And it just grows this culture of positivity on campus too when those things are going on. And it's just a break, and it's kind of like being a kid again when the treat trolley comes by, and and we all kind of need that break when our mind is up here stressed with 8 million things going on, and then, hey, come get a snack. Like, no, it's just like a little bit of a break, but it is also that recognition of we're gonna give you, reward, just show you we know you're doing a good job, we know you're working hard.
Well, certainly teachers have to balance a lot of things, and balancing all those things that are being thrown at you. I'm getting some questions in from the audience, and so certainly those that have questions, certainly use your cards on the table, or those that are watching virtually can submit questions as well. But one of the questions was, kind of fits in with the gift of giving again and giving back that time. And one of the questions asks about the idea of the 4-day school week, you know, and the concept of giving back time. What are your opinions on the idea of a 4-day school week, and how would that impact student learning and also teacher mental health?
That's a great question. The learning gap that we see when students are on summer break is definitely real. The challenge that we face as educators is to do everything we can to close the gap and keep our students on grade level with their, reading, math, core, and all the different expectations. So regarding my philosophy on it, I definitely think it's something worth exploring. I haven't done too much research into it, but I can definitely see the value in extending the year, but reducing the number of days per week. Now, there's obviously going to be some ancillary challenges that come with that as well, because childcare is real, those type of things. And so you also think about, okay, if I'm working and my child is off, like who's watching my child? So, I mean, there's definitely challenges there, but anything we can do to help mitigate that summer gap that we naturally see, I think is definitely worth exploring.
From what I've read, some of the smaller districts that have gone to the 4-day work week have seen a decrease in teacher vacancies, that it has been a driver of getting more teachers to be there. And I can absolutely see where that would be the case. I just don't know in our big districts where we have schools where we've got extracurricular things going on 5 days a week, more than that even. I don't know how shutting the school down for a day would be effective, but there's ways I'm sure that you could manipulate the schedule to where you still are able to do those. But I'm just not very familiar with the 4-day week. I don't see it coming to Fort Bend anytime soon.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree. There's a lot of, I'm interested in it just to see how it could work, but the logistics of it, are pretty tough. Tomball, we're the smallest district represented in this table today. And I think the stakeholders would, have a lot of, they need to be heavily involved in that decision. And it needs to be what's best for the community. I know that smaller districts, the research shows smaller districts, have better chances of hiring, which is something that we all struggle with right now, especially, after the pandemic. And that's a perk. But once everybody starts doing it, I don't know if it would be a perk anymore.
Just one thing added on hiring and on staffing that leads, I think, to teacher stress is the teachers that have been teaching for a long time. Sometimes I feel like they're being put in the place of having to mentor new teachers or teachers that have zero experience. Because of our shortages, we started an instructional apprentice position, which is they can come in and they're not long-term subs. They get benefits. They make a decent salary, but they don't have to be certified. Now they do have to be working towards their certification before the end of the school year. But I think we don't want to put an extra thing on our seasoned teachers, our veteran teachers, to have to feel like that they're having to mentor and pick up these teachers that may be on their teams that are brand new and fresh. So it's just another thing that adds, again, to the stress level of somebody who's on a team of geometry teachers, and there might be one who's brand new and is learning along the whole way, and a lot more being placed on those teachers that have been there and are veterans.
Well, those are really great kind of creative ways to engage new programs within schools. What are other ways that maybe your schools have either partnered with parents or communities to try to improve things like teacher well-being or teacher retention?
So one of the things that we have done is we try our best to work with our community partners for some of those things that my colleague was speaking of earlier, just little things to show appreciation. So working with various, whether it's faith-based organizations, social service organizations, that want to come in and just spread a little love to the teachers. So it could be something as simple as, hey, Mr. Brantley, can we come by and just have coffee? Like, just have coffee out and donuts, or can we come by and just love on the teachers, like during lunch, and just have like maybe a cold treat or something like that. Little things like that. That community partners, I think, leveraging community partners that just want to come in and just have a light touch point with our teachers, just to say thank you from the community. Like, it's not just in the school, but we as a community know that what you do is hard, and we know that sometimes it can appear to be thankless, but we do see what you're doing, and we want to show even a little appreciation. Those things go a long, long way for our teachers and for the administration as well, because sometimes we feel like it's on us to try to validate, but when we can get the community to wrap around and say, hey, we see you, we appreciate you, that goes a long way.
We've taken time throughout the year to focus on days dedicated to professional development, where as a district we get together and do a lot of different activities, but some of those activities include focusing, using yoga teachers and using mindfulness experts to come in and give strategies and feedback. We have, my favorite's goat yoga. We have goat yoga twice a year. Just different strategies to, and it's open to whoever wants to participate. And it's just, those are partnerships that we've made, throughout the community. If you want to go to goat yoga, it's in Tomball. But, those are partnerships we've made to support the, mindfulness and stress of our teachers.
Mr. Brogan brought in puppies.
One of which is at my house now.
Failed foster.
Yeah, Foster, sure.
I'd like to also add, one thing that we've done at my campus, and I know multiple campuses around HISD, is to invest in to this theme of support and mental health, and things to try to decompress and allow for teachers to relieve stresses, having on-site mental health supports and counseling support. So I know at my campus we do have a counselor who works exclusively with mental health and is available for circle conversations after school, just none, there's no pressure to attend anything like that, and just having avenues to just share different ideas and thoughts, and even when there's different things that happen in the classroom and maybe stressful things that they're dealing with, to know they can go in a very non-judgmental or in a very confidential manner, be able to talk to someone. In the district, HISD has an employee assistance program as well, and just making sure that our staff knows that there are resources available to support some of those mental health needs that we know are there, but we need to be more strategic about voicing them and making sure they're accessible.
Prior to COVID, I would say that I wouldn't say, but I would tell you that the biggest thing that parents were concerned with was school safety. I mean, that was the big topic, was school safety. So we had a group of parents that got together and formed a group called Walk, Watch, Repeat. And they would come into our hallways and just walk the building, watch what's going on, and just kind of repeat it, give them some time to get a little exercise, and just an additional set of eyes and ears around the building is so beneficial. And it's also great for our teachers to see that we've got parent involvement and parent community that are out there behind them, helping them to do their jobs in terms of making sure that transitions and things in the hallways are happening. With COVID, it kind of took a back seat. I'm glad to say it's back now this year. So it's just a community partnership that really is effective in schools, and just was a grassroots thing from a couple of parents.
Yeah, and those parents are often our biggest advocates too, because they actually get to see what's going on in our schools. Rather than just taking a guess or listening to what their children are saying, these are adults that are actually in our schools, seeing it firsthand and walking the hallways and hearing conversation. They are seeing what's going on in classrooms as they walk past, and so they are actually our biggest advocates too. But I would say, as far as mental health with teachers, as I've cataloged here, like the list of things that I've heard teachers say are stressing them out, one of the other things I wanted to note is that teachers are also our biggest supporters too. You know, we know when to close a door and just have a frank conversation and with that teacher that's going to lift us up, right? We are problem solvers by nature, right? We always tell the kids, don't come at me with a problem unless you can propose a solution, and teachers are really big about that too, right? And we like to lift each other up. We know that we're in the trenches together, and so we know how to just, it's going to be okay, and here, let me give you this strategy, or hey, let me give you this tip, and here, let me model it for you, and let me show you. And some of my colleagues are the best support when it comes to my mental health, because I know it can be done, and they're there to support me, and you know, I support them the same way. And our administrators, we're very, very blessed to have administrators on our campus that not only listen, that want to listen, that want our feedback, want to listen, but also are very deliberate about trying to have an action that follows up with what they hear from us. And not always, you know, is that possible, because they have bosses and they have legislators and they have all this other stuff on them. You know, y'all have a lot of that going on. And we're okay hearing no, you know, but we want someone to listen. And that has been a big part of our mental health too, is having those support leadership roles that are willing to just hear us and then act.
So my final question to y'all, so hearing, you know, the teacher stress, you know, balancing those many challenges that you have with, you know, students that are engaging in a mental health crisis, got teachers that have got to keep track of who's on a 504, who's on an IEP, and then trying to get the curricula in throughout the day as well, and then dealing with parents who may or may not have realistic expectations of what should be done in the classrooms. You know, what would be your kind of like wish from us and message to us, as far as like what would your desires be moving forward, you know, to the next steps of what your final goal, what goal would you have for us as far as like a program or something that you could do or wish that to help us best guide into the future on this?
Yeah. Can we change the narrative about being a teacher? I have a student in my classroom who I adore, and he would be the absolute best teacher, the best. And he's a senior this year, and he's looking at colleges, and he said, I'm gonna go into optometry. And I said, why? Because he's a football player, that's never been like the thing that I thought was for him. And he said, because I can help people, I can make a difference, and I'm gonna make some good money. I said, okay. I said, have you ever thought about education? And he goes, Mama, that real talk, no disrespect, but y'all don't make nearly enough for me to deal with all of this. And I kind of, okay, you know. And I said, we don't make that, you know. And he was like, no, for real. And I was like, okay. But there's this narrative that, you know, and it's a thankless job, and we are underpaid and all, but I worry going into the future that we're losing out on an opportunity to have great educators that are, in our building, are life changers because of this narrative that we have so much put on us, and because we need these young people to go into education. We need them to go be world changers. We need them to see the value and the rewards that we feel when we love on our kids and we see them do well. And I get to high five a kid who got accepted to a college they didn't think they were going to be able to, and that love that teachers have, that we always say we don't do it for the money, you know, we do it because we love what we do. And I need these young people to see that and feel that. And so, like, I just feel like there needs to be a change in the narrative. But with that, though, you know, we got to recruit those teachers that are willing to instill that in our kids too. They're willing to make those relationships with those kids and inspire them and push them so that they want to come back and do the same for the next generation. So I don't know if that answered your question, but that's my thoughts.
For me, it would be just to that people know that teaching, when done correctly, when being impactful, is a tough job. And it's, you know, we talk about, you know, we want them to be the adult that they needed when they were a kid. And just have a little empathy, have a little grace. At times, we're gonna make mistakes, and we understand that parents are advocates for their children. Absolutely get that 100%. But let's have a professional, respectful conversation when there's an issue or a concern that comes up. I think that would go a long way to making things a lot better between, with how teachers feel about themselves and feel about the stress level that's on them.
I would say that any way that we can provide opportunities to create more access for community and family engagement. So policymakers, those that are making decisions that are going to provide funding or opportunities for avenues to be created for more opportunities for engagement within our communities. One of the things that I see in my community is that there are barriers to access to basic needs in the community, transportation, food insecurities, things like that. So I was sharing with a colleague earlier, one of the most frustrating things for me since I've been at my current campus as principal is having the desire to engage with the community, but I know that my parents are working. I know they're taking care of children. They're working multiple jobs. They have a lot of responsibility. And so sometimes just having access to resources to get to the school, or if we're having a meeting out in the community, to get to the community, or basic needs like internet in the home. Making sure that we have grant opportunities and funding opportunities for internet, because I can have a virtual meeting where parents can jump online. I'll also say in my community, which is very heavy when it comes to English language learners, is access to translation services. Just families having access to be able to get documents translated, just basic things translated in their home language. So any sort of agency or advocacy groups or opportunities for funding to help with that. So just being able to build bridges for family and community engagement. So policymakers and those that are making decisions that can support with that will be very helpful, because the desire is there, but the access is not always there. And so we want to try to do what we can to support that.
Absolutely.
I think one of the things that, I'm a big proponent of collective leadership and working together. Together we can solve, major problems. And what, one wish I have is kind of like what Mr. Brantley said is, if we can get, policymakers, stakeholders, parents, everybody together and rowing in the same direction, we'd be unstoppable. And that's something that, through not just the leadership of the school, the leadership of the community, the leadership of the legislators, like we could, turn things around and turn taxes around if we could. So that's something that we need to find ways to do that. And, it's tough right now in a polarized political climate that we live in, but, hopefully, as things continue to progress, it'll solve.
Yeah, I think that goes back to our first panel when they were talking about even Dr. Sanborn was talking about the value on teachers, that there's, we went from hero and sometimes now to zero, because of what Mr. Brogan was talking about with, we need those parents to know that we are trying. We love their kids. We want what's best for them. We want to hold them to a high standard while also just loving on them as well. And so sometimes parents don't understand what that looks like. And we just want them to know that we really are trying and are willing to partner and work with them. And even if it's not the way that they see it, but we are really hard workers.
Well, I
Simple.
think that y'all have done an amazing job leading the way and taking our youth, and looking forward to what the next generation is going to bring us. But I'm very optimistic to where we could be in the future. So thank you so much for your time today. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and opinions with us. Thank you, everyone. So. I'm going to go ahead and invite our next panel up here, and Dr. Hafiz.
Hey everyone, my name is Zoe Hafiz. I'm a pediatric hospitalist down the road at McGovern Medical School at UT Health in Houston. Where I'm an associate professor, I'm also a non-resident fellow here at the Baker Institute. And I'm honored to introduce this next panel on mental health lessons learned from the pandemic. So briefly, COVID is not the only crisis that our kids have experienced in the last few years, as I'm sure everyone in this room knows. The American Academy of Pediatrics proclaimed a mental health emergency for our kids, I think a couple of years ago. And in 2021, according to the Youth Behavioral Risk Survey, a national data set, 42% of students felt persistently sad or hopeless, and nearly 1/3 experienced poor mental health. So more than 1 in 5 kids have considered attempting suicide. Our students are in crisis. This is coupled with approximately 1/3 of students feeling unsafe at school, according to recent national surveys. So contributing factors include bullying, which do include cyberbullying, and emotional and behavioral problems. Of course, we can't forget the impact from events like Uvalde, which have long-lasting effects on students and communities. So poor mental health can impact multiple factors, including a student's social, emotional learning, academic performance, and ultimately, overall school success. We will continue to have events that will challenge our youth, but we can learn from these experiences and build environments for children to thrive. So today we have 3 esteemed panelists who are experts in this field and have worked through the crises over the last few years. Their expertise can help us identify gaps and opportunities for collaboration. So without further ado, I'll start from the end. This is Dr. Ann Lay. Dr. Lay is a published author and speaker across diverse educational areas, including special education, discipline, behavior, and restorative practices. She was named 2023 Sam Houston State University's Distinguished Educator of the Year and their May 2023 graduation commencement speaker. She has supported and advocated for individuals with disabilities for over 12 years as a special education teacher, educational diagnostician, and behavioral specialist. She is currently leading the development and improvement of instructional she currently serves as Assistant Director of Special Education at Willis ISD, where she leads the development and improvement of instructional programs for the Special Education Department. Next is Dr. Taiwo Babatope. She's a child psychiatrist and assistant professor in the Department of Psychiatry at UT Health in Houston, where she serves as the training director of the Child and Adolescent Psychiatry Fellowship Program and the executive director of the Texas Child Mental Health Consortium Service Programs. She's also the director of the Autism Spectrum Disorders and Neurodevelopmental Lifespan Specialty Clinic and a telemedicine-based provider with the UT Health in Houston Child Psychiatry Access Network, called CPAN. Since July 2020, much of her focus has been on Texas Child Mental Health Care Consortium initiatives, which include managing state-funded programs in the department, including CPAN, the Texas Child Access Through Telemedicine, or TCHAT, and the Community Psychiatry Workforce Expansion efforts. Finally, we have Dr. Lillian Dindo. Dr. Dindo is a clinical psychologist and associate professor in the Department of Medicine, Section of Health Services Research at Baylor College of Medicine, and research health scientist at the Houston Michael DeBakey VA Medical Center. VA Medical Center, sorry. Her career has been focused on developing innovative psychological interventions to build resiliency for people with a range of difficulties. She is funded by the National Institutes of Health, the Veterans Health Administration, and the Office of Rural Health. Dr. Dindo is also the site leader of the Houston Mental Illness Research Education and Clinical Center. So thank you, panelists, for joining us.
Thank you.
So I'll have a seat real quick. So obviously actually let me wait till I can get to a microphone. So obviously this panel has a depth and breadth of expertise in child mental health in a variety of settings. These last few years, children have experienced an enormous amount of stressors with the pandemic, economic strains, and safety concerns after Uvalde. So I guess my first question, just to begin with, is I always understood this, and this is for everyone, but Dr. Dindo, I know you have some expertise in this topic. As we understood it, when it comes to children specifically, that this mental health crisis didn't come out of thin air. It's been an ongoing problem from the 1960s, maybe even before that, that seems that COVID and some of these other very stressful, very violent events that occurred in Texas and the country just sort of exacerbated and maybe brought some more light to. My first question is, what is the impact of these factors, this chronic stress that these factors are creating, and how can it manifest in the school setting?
Okay, I'm going to back up a little bit,
Sure,
because
please.
I think first we have to talk about the rates increasing over the last 15 years or so. So like you said earlier, and I just kind of want to reiterate, we are in a youth mental health crisis right now. 1/3 of our kids report significant depression. 1/6 of our kids report significant anxiety. If we are going to just talk about general distress, 50% of our kids have it. The rates of suicide have gone up 25%, and in kids aged 10 to 14, they have tripled. Actually, suicide is the leading cause of death among our youth right now, followed by after accidents. So it's more than all natural causes combined. Now, that's alarming, but I think what's even more alarming is that less than 50%, closer to 30%, get any kind of treatment at all. So we have an access issue that's a really big problem, and that's exacerbating the problem. The reason why schools are important is that a lot of these kids actually get their mental health treatment from schools, from school counselors, right? And we also see a lot of disparities here, that people from minority populations, they're more likely to go get help from the schools. So we're putting a massive burden on the school system that's already overburdened, right? And we're also only addressing things in crisis mode, right? So we have a big problem. We have a huge access problem where most people, it is very cost prohibitive to get mental health treatment. We don't have parity. We do not have parity for mental health treatment, and we don't have access to providers. And so we're always just addressing crisis after crisis. And so how does this impact people's education? Well, when you're depressed, when you're anxious, when you're angry, when you have ADHD, when you have when you have any of these issues, your school, your achievement is gonna suffer significantly. And so, number one, the kids are suffering. Number two, I don't know that the schools have the capacity to actually address these issues, but more than 50% of people who need treatment will get it de facto from the schools. I don't think our counselors in the schools are actually getting the support or the training or the resources they need. And so they're getting burned out too. I could go on and on, but I think I'll stop for now.
I think you brought up a theme of this day, which is overburdened schools as being identified as places to try to solve all of these problems. Dr. Babatope, you have led the charge with CPAM and TChat. How could these programs and programs like these maybe help with this problem, and how do they interface with schools? And sort of an open-ended question, what's your opinion on how they can help going forward?
Of course. Thank you so much, Dr. Hafiz. I always like to start this topic with the story, the Texas Child Mental Health Consortium that came about in 2020. And that was supposed to leverage the expertise and the capacity of health-related institutes of higher learning to be able to draw on the expertise we already have there and multiply the efforts. And our main charge is access and systems of care. And we do know Texas has an access problem. We do know that there's mental health shortage of professionals. We're 765 child psychiatrists in the state of Texas. There are more than 7 million kids that need us. Probably 150 of us are in the Houston area. Some counties don't even have any psychiatrists whatsoever, or social workers or clinicians. So we decided to do this through 5 initiatives. That is the Child Psychiatry Access Network, where primary care providers, who are usually the mainstay in the communities, they can have access to a child psychiatrist within 30 minutes. Not only that, they can get referral resources in their county. Another initiative, especially for schools, is the Texas Child Health Access to Telemedicine Service, where we partner with schools. We sign MOUs with these schools where counselors can get to refer their kids to us immediately. So if the teachers or the school counselors see a kid struggling, they can send us an email, send us a referral resource. We reach out to the family to obtain consent, and we do schedule a telemedicine service. with them. And of course, the services we provide are medication management, therapy services, and care coordination to long-term services and care. Now, the third initiative we worked on was how do we increase the workforce in the state of Texas? And we decided to do this by sending our own attendants, which are the child psychiatrists, into those communities, either in person or telemedicine, and our trainees as well, to be able to provide services free of charge. I want to remind everyone, all these are Texas state funded. They are all free services. So we send our child psychiatrists to the LMHAs. Now we're partnered with Harris County, Harris Center, we're partnered with Texana, we're partnered with Burke, Tri-County, we just partnered with them, Spindletop, all around Houston, surrounding areas, and we send our trainees there to start to see patients. We've seen so many patients, more than 20,000 a year. Not only that, we also need to increase the training of the mental health professionals. We don't have a lot of people going into child psychiatry. Why? Because first of all, you spend at least 5 years to get trained after medical school. And we already know people have careers before medical school, and it takes a long time. So most people want to graduate 3 years, start to pay off their loans. So we got some additional funds to create rotations and to increase the number of people we take per year. Not only that, we decided to also expand psychology internship programs to train them, and also social work programs. Then the last initiative is our research initiatives on depression, suicide, trauma. So those are some of the things that we are actually doing to address not only access, but the systems of care. Luckily for us, we got extra funds to expand on those initiatives from the American Rescue Plan Act. And that is where, even to the schools, you know, I've been listening to so many people talk about burnout, talk about teachers, because basically you're the parents, you're the mental health coordinators, you are the therapists, you are everything to these kids. And not only that, when you see a kid, you're thinking of a family, a community behind them. We talk about people of color, marginalized population. So what we decided to do was also to expand on those access to care, provide trauma-informed care, TFCBT, for some of these kids that may never even get treatment for trauma, also substance use. We decided to create a program. All these are free. But I feel most people don't know about it, and that's why, you know, we are distributing the flyers, we're getting the word out there, we're doing outreach, community town halls. We just did one in July at UT Houston now, and we're going into religious organizations, we're going into the schools to tell them we are here, use us, we've gotten paid, so you're not giving us anything extra. Please utilize us. Not only that, so we provide substance use treatment, we provide trauma-focused CBT, and also we provide also a youth awareness of mental health, psychoeducation to the kids on how to be able to identify their emotions and how to be able to signal that they are in distress. So psychoeducation is one and the others. So these are some of the things we are trying to do, but we know the work is never done, right? We know the pandemic really affected those kids with pre-existing mental health conditions as well. Kids with ADHD, autism, they didn't do so well. So being able to provide that access, you know, I tell people, and I think I said it the last time I came here, I have a year waiting list already. I mean, some people try to connect with other clinicians to send me emails to say, hey, can we get in, or could you go through the training and all that? And that's because there are not many of us. Now, can we fix this in a day? No. It's going to take time. Transformation takes time. It takes effort. It takes a while for people to get beside that. So these are some of the initiatives for the school advocates actually in this building. The way to access us, we are partnered with several ISDs. After Uvalde, we decided not only to partner with our current partners, but to expand to all the counties, ISDs in Texas. So we're partnered with Elif, Aldine, Broaddus, Cy-Fair, Humboldt, Harris County. We're partnered with Fort Bend, Katy, Jasper, Waller, Needville, Goose Creek, the International School of Leadership, Yes Prep, Harmony Schools. We are there, we're everywhere, but we are not getting a lot of traction or referrals from the school system. Maybe perhaps there's not a lot of awareness out there, and maybe they're also burdened as well. So, I mean, it's multifactorial, and we're trying to see how best to be able to address all these needs.
Thank you. So, Dr. Lay, my next question is for you. It seems like you have both experience within academics and also on the ground over at Willis ISD. I'm curious specific to the special education population, but also as a whole, what are you guys seeing in terms of, well, I guess specific to the special education population, how are they uniquely affected, and do they have any unique characteristics in how they're dealing with this ongoing larger mental health crisis? And do they present and make their issues known in a different way?
So in general, I'm going to start backtracking a little bit first. In general, when we see these chronic stress or toxic stress, it does impact the way that the brain functions. Our body is utilizing that energy that we typically use for our normal functioning, our normal development, and it's diverting into impairing those function, learning, our memories, our intentions, executive functioning. So it's going to manifest in the school environment to where we're going to see learning difficulties. We're going to see ADHD type characteristics, where the inattention, the behavior outbursts, inability to self-regulate and self-control. So that's just the general population. Now, when we talk about our students who are supported through the special education program, these students have already been identified with learning disabilities, other health impairment due to ADHD, emotional disturbance, autism. They're already lacking the skills, so the gap between learning and even behavior and functioning is already wide. Now, with the chronic stress, with the Uvalde and also COVID or any other family stressors, they're taking it in, but they don't know how to react to that. They don't know how to handle that. They don't know how to deal with that. They're already lacking skills, social skills, being able to understand how to process our typical normal day-to-day situations like we do. So in terms of special education, there's a big gap there where our general education students are already suffering as it is. They don't know, they don't have the skills to be able to process that. So we're seeing our behaviors more intense now. They're more frequent, and it's gonna exhibit as out of control, physical, verbal aggression, because they cannot communicate what it is that they are feeling, and they don't know how to express what it is that they need and want for us to know. So it is intensified.
Yeah. What kind of programs have you guys tried to implement on the ground level? This is sort of a question for everyone that you guys have seen. What programs have been adopted to try to address these, and how has it been going so far?
So I'm new to Willis. This is my first school year in Willis ISD, but prior to that, I was at Tomball ISD, and I can tell you I oversaw the wraparound services and also restorative practices for the district as a behavior specialist. And such as Dr. Babatov had mentioned about T-Chat, I was immersed in the whole process of telecounseling, of T-Chat. I was communicating with those providers to bring in the community resources that are free for our school district, and advertising it and making it aware and trying to get referrals. A lot of the setback that I had was parents were afraid. Parents did not know if they wanted people to know that they were needing help. And so having that conversation, being the liaison between educating our parents and educating our communities and educating our educators to accepting that it is okay for us to ask for help. And so in Tomball, we had T-Chat, we had Texas Care, we had Harris Center, we had online versions to where teachers could utilize, it's called Aspire from MD Anderson. We had Everfi to address social skills that are accustomed in a manner in which our children today are used to, which is technology. It's very cartoon and very engaging, interactive format. And so it engages students. And so when they have behavioral outcries or when they have disciplinary issues, one of the first things that we do is not go punitive directly, but trying to find the root cause of that problem and giving them a restorative approach, working with them to teach them the skills that they may be lacking in order to address the outburst that they had exhibited.
Interesting. Out of curiosity, you named a wide variety of programs. When you, just your own opinion, when you guys are evaluating these programs, what are some of the characteristics of some of these programs that you felt really made a big difference? What were the ones that really, and then why were those programs so effective? Or is it early days still, for anyone?
I personally went through the process as a parent, even though I was the person who was representing the school district at that time with TCHAT. And I've also listened to other parents' feedback on how these processes are, and I can tell you from my personal, I'm not endorsing any, but I will tell you as a parent, I value TCHAT more.
Dr. Babitov's happy.
They were responsive. They're easy to get, they're easy to get a hold of. On the school side, the referral process went from, the first year I did it, it was a little more time consuming, but they moved into a computer-based program. It was easy for the counselor to input the information. It was easy for us to just pop in and look at all the graphs and everything like that. School side, it's accessibility. Family side, it was very kind and understanding staff members on TCHAT side. They were very responsive. They called when they told the parents that they would call. It's on both sides, and the students, they valued that. On top of that, it was also available virtually. And then some of ours is they could have the session at school if the parents did not have internet, did not have the ability to be there with the child. So we would set it up to where the school counselor or an administrator would be around for that child to receive the interventions at the school. Or if they were able to, it could be at the home. So it was very flexible to what the family and that child needed.
I think she's already done my work for me, so I'll just, no, but I do have to say something. Since we started, just like she said, we've tried to make it easy for parents, the kids, and the school to work with. And we've seen so many kids. What TCHAT brings is, not only do we have interim 8 weeks therapy available, we also have medication management. Now, if for some reason we are unable to connect them with long-term services, we continue to see till we do. So we kind of maintain the same provider, the clinician. We start to work on different modalities, and we start to see how best to effectively support them. And of course, telemedicine is the avenue that we use to be able to reach the family. Recently, one of the families, they were so amazed at the turnaround of their kid. Their kid had been struggling with ADHD, and it's actually on the news now. I think UT highlighted it at some point. So they interviewed the family. The kid has had so much strides in 6 months, academic-wise now on honor roll, and everything was to TCHAT services. And we do get our testimonials. We get other people telling us that they've benefited from the program. And one thing I do want to say, the schools have also been helpful. She mentioned something about access at the school as well. Because we do know that some of our students don't have internet in their homes. Some of them also, privacy is a concern. The low income, immigration, families that live in multi-family homes. So having the sessions in the school also provides some level of privacy for the kid as well. And also, of course, ensures that the kid makes their therapy appointments and sessions. I mean, we've had some kids still struggle a little bit. No intervention is 100% like curative or any of all that. However, we've seen kind of like an improvement in declines in behaviors. We don't see lots of mental health crisis, behavioral health issues as long as they're in care, which lets us know that some of our evidence-based interventions are working. And because of the pandemic, we do know cognitive behavioral therapy, which is helpful for depression and anxiety, the protocol has been modified to accommodate and to adopt pandemic-related stress, and we utilize that. All our services that are provided are evidence-based. Behavioral therapies such as TFCBT, which is trauma-focused CBT, also we do know has a lot of evidence with PTSD from grief, loss, associated with the pandemic. So these are just some of the things that we do on our end.
Interesting. So, Dr. Dindo, I know a lot of your work has been involved in resiliency training and psychological interventions to build resiliency in kids. How does that factor into what Dr. Lay is seeing on the ground, and how can that help us in this mental health epidemic?
Well, I think this is a multi-tiered approach. What they're talking about is really like the medical model, kind of, and the really like crisis. These are people who are really struggling right now. We're in crisis, we go help them out. I think the public health approach is, okay, how do we provide resiliency training, social emotional learning to all our kiddos and at a lower intensity. And I think that's something that we can really do much better at. So for example, there is a lot of social emotional training or social emotional learning happening in the schools. I think we can do better because we have 30 years of science on what are some of the core competencies, emotional competencies, but those are actually not being translated into the schools, right? Like every school does their own thing, and counselors are actually desperate for training, to be honest. And so I think the approach they're describing is complementary to the approach I'm describing. Like, I think we need to do something preventive for all our kids. Why are we waiting until they're in crisis mode, right? Why are we waiting until they've actually gotten depressed or anxious or traumatized or, right? When we have 30 years of data on what can help them better deal with difficult thoughts. We all have difficult thoughts. We all have difficult emotions. We all struggle, me and you. The ones that do better are the ones that have been actually taught how to respond to difficult thoughts, respond to difficult emotions, how to be courageous even when it doesn't feel like good, right? And so I think, so for example, what we're trying to do now, we've developed a program, a resiliency program, and we tried actually to go to many schools. And what was interesting is we would go to the schools, we would talk to the principals and counselors jumped on it, and then the minute we would have to submit to the board of directors, the parents and the board of directors were like, no one's gonna teach our kids anything about emotions or thoughts. It's a very interesting thing. Like, I think, and we went to the legislature, I mean, parents, there's stigma around it. There's so much stigma around it. So we're trying to figure out how to talk about this in a way that mental health we're teaching people science, we're teaching them math, we're teaching them English, and yet we're not teaching them a huge component of what can help them do better in these things, which is how to manage difficult thoughts and emotions. And parents don't want us going down that road with them, which is really fascinating to me.
One of the things that struck me about the first session with Dr. Hunt and others, I think Dr. Hunt mentioned this, something about how you phrase.
Totally.
Can you guys, yeah, go ahead.
And I was going to mention that it is really about the word choices that you use and how you are presenting it to the community and the parents and the board, because there are some trigger words, especially as of late. Like, we can't talk about social emotional learning, but if you break it down to what those skills are and we talk about how they help, it's like two different things to the people who are so against social emotional learning, because they don't want us to interfere with their child's natural development of thinking. Like, they don't want us to sway them a certain way. But if we talk about, you know, just skills about being resilient or skills about how to cope, like if we just chose the right words, we can still go about our task and our goal to embedding those skills to be able to help deal and cope and things like that without actually using social emotional learning.
I mean, I don't even really like that term, social emotional learning. It's not actually that scientific, to be honest with you. I try to use resiliency, but what's fascinating is that even resiliency triggers people, because we went to a school, we talked to some of the principals and the board, and they said resiliency is associated with like underserved, you know, minority people who like are really struggling, and so you're trying to build resiliency. So it is a lot about languaging, but I also think we need a public education campaign for the country as a whole, that mental health is not something to be ashamed of.
Right.
It's not something to be, you know, stigmatized, actually. Like, in this room, I'm sure every single one of you has a family member or knows someone very close to them that has been depressed, or it's part of the human condition. We all will encounter something that's a challenge, and our goal is to respond to those challenges in the most effective way possible. And so if we have the science for this, why not disseminate it?
That makes sense, yeah.
But your point is a very good one. Like, what our program that we developed, it has 6 components based on science, 6 building blocks. One of them is called values, but we don't mean values in a moralistic or ethical way. We simply mean it like what matters most to you, right? But the word values, oh, don't get near that.
Yes.
Do not get near that with parents, you know? And so we don't use the word values, right? But it is trying to get kids to really identify, like, what do you want your life to look like? And can you be courageous and go in that direction? So words matter a lot, but I also think we need a public health campaign around mental health.
But I also think that we need to also consider the fact that a lot of our culture, the families, their cultures have a certain view about mental health and depression and anxiety. Like, in the Asian culture, that's like taboo, do not talk about it. We don't have an issue. Like, I suffer from major depressive disorder my entire life. Growing up, my mom just told me, suck it up and deal with it. Do not let your family and other families know. You just have to swallow it up and then deal with it, which in a way, I found a way to handle my depression and know when it's coming up. But most people don't have those skills. Most people need people to teach them how to, but they don't have the access to the professionals to do because they're afraid of the stigmatization.
That's why I think the public education campaign is very important, but also embedding mental health, and we can call it something else. I'm just using the term mental health here because we all understand what that means, but we do also need to embed education and mental health services into these different areas, churches, community centers. Like, I'm from a different community. I'm also from a minority community, and there were 4 suicides in the last year in my community. No one talks about it as suicide. Everyone talks about it as like a car accident or this or that. And that just leads to more suffering for the parents and more suffering for the community and more hush-hush. So embedding education also into the communities, into different places that are not typical, I think is very important.
And I think one thing I want to stress here is, you know, dealing with different families from different backgrounds, cultural norms, and what is seen as weak, strong. You know, when we talk about things like mental health and resilience, there are things they can't really, the word is, it's not as tangible enough for them. So I usually try to make it very concrete. And one thing I do know, when we talk about values as well, values, it's hard for you to translate that until you start to talk about what are the results of poor mental health. So I try from the standpoint of, we do know that psychiatric disorders lead to higher school dropouts, less educational attainment, inability to secure a job. We know socioeconomic burden of what it could be, not only to the patient, to the family, and to the community. So I try to frame it in a way of, we want little Charlie to do best. We want him to be able to finish high school. What are the things that could help him? Could it be emotional regulation? And what we are just going to do is focus on the things that could help him to emotionally regulate so he can pay attention in class, because we want him to be successful, right? And we do know, what does Charlie want to be? That's the first thing we start. Charlie wants to be an astronaut. Okay, if Charlie wants to be an astronaut, there are some things that are tangible. And most parents want their kids to succeed. So not framing it as resilience, but framing it as, hey, in order to be able to secure a job, and probably in order to be able to control his impulse and not use substances or drop out or do all these things, he needs the skills to be able to do that. And they're usually very amenable to that.
Yeah.
Like, okay, you told me this tiered approach is what's going to help Charlie. Let's do it and see it. And most times they're usually positive. And they also want reports of what has actually come of that before. So then we start to say, hey, I had a kid just like Charlie, and Charlie struggled with this, and this is what we did. Do you think we could try it? And they always at least want to give it. So tying it to something like attainment, preventing teen pregnancy, preventing incarceration and homelessness if he's unable to get a job, not being an upstanding member of the community which we represent and we hold dear, our cultural values, that usually rings true to them on some note.
So, yeah, go ahead.
Can I comment on that?
Please,
I think
yeah.
that's actually so right on, because for example, I'll work with a lot of parents who have kids with ADHD, and they don't want to medicate. They just don't want to medicate. They've heard all these things about stimulants. They've heard all these things. But the research has shown, and I'll tell them this, I'll say, okay, there's a research study out of Iowa, 30-year longitudinal naturalistic study. Half were medicated, half were not medicated for ADHD. The ones that were not medicated ended up in prison or doing drugs, much more likely to do drugs in prison, use alcohol. They self-medicate in other ways, right? And then end up actually doing a lot worse. And then they do listen. They do listen at that point. Then it becomes more palpable. I think my challenge is like, okay, we're still in crisis mode with those people, right? Like, what about all the science we have on preventing that? Like, we have so much information on how we can help people before we get to that point. Our system is already overextended.
Yeah.
The one more thing I want to say that we have not touched on at all is the dangers and the benefits of social media.
Yes.
We haven't touched on that, but that's a massive issue here. And yes, there are definitely benefits to social media. You don't want to throw out everything. At the same time, it has absolutely exacerbated our mental health crisis, especially among girls, among everyone, but especially among girls. And
Cross-culturally.
cross-culturally, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. But social media is playing a really big role in the exacerbation of distress-based disorders. And I don't think we're addressing that properly either.
Interesting. So there's a couple of different directions we can go. One of the things that I sort of heard from all three of you was, I saw a lot of nods when we were starting to talk about community-specific resistance patterns, and the language that we use matters. And it sounds like it's not so much in terms of the larger politics, but more that community, and even more specifically that family. Is that fair? So I guess my question is, what is the role of the communities and families, and how do you get them on board. And I think if I could ask a follow-up question before anyone answers the question, is do the principles stay the same regardless of the cultural background, or do they change depending on what that community and what that family values?
The principles are the same.
Okay.
The principles are the same. Like, I'll give you two concrete kind of examples. We all have difficult thoughts. I'm going to ask everyone here, have you ever thought, I'm not smart enough? Raise your hand if you've ever thought that. Okay. Have you ever had the thought, I'm not good enough in general? Like, welcome to being human, right? Welcome to the human condition. We all have difficult thoughts. That is one core process of how do we handle that thought. Now, I can have the thought, I'm not good enough, really believe it, and then decide I'm not going to go to graduate school because I'm just not good enough. Sure. Or I can have that thought, I'm not good enough, and still I'm going to go to graduate school. It's the believability of it almost. Does it stop me from actually moving forward in my life, right? We all have the thoughts. The question is, what do we do with that thought? So that's a core competency, cross-cultural, absolutely. There are 5 others that are, there are more than 5, but yes, they apply. Now, what are the specific examples? They might vary culture to culture, right? But the core competencies based on science over the last 30 years are common, I think, across cultures.
So I think it's important to acknowledge that there's not a single strategy or service that can erase or tackle or solve this problem that we have with mental health. For all of us involved, the school system, the community, the families, the student, we need to really stop blaming other people. I know everyone points their finger, well, this is the reason why my child's having a problem. Instead of blaming or finding a blame in someone else, I think we all need to work together. We need to communicate. We need to bring the problem at a table and talk about it together. It's about the whole child. The school knows the child from school. The parents know that child from birth. The child, if age appropriate, needs to be involved in what their life and their decisions should be. They need to have a say. We just need to come together and work together as a team. And I know that's hard, but our ultimate goal is always centered on that student. That child is going to grow up to be the community member. It's going to be the adult who's going to lead in whatever field in the future. And so right now we need to address the focus on the child, help him so that he could be a better community member for our society in the future.
So one thing I do want to touch on, in how do communities and parents, help? In hospital medicine, whenever you introduce a new EMR like Epic, they identify champions. That person that they teach knows everything and goes to disseminate it amongst the other physicians who don't want to use it because they're used to the last EMR. So identifying specific people in communities matter, because we do know wherever we all come from, the Nigerian community, Asian, there are usually organizations or maybe spaces where one person has been identified. Reaching to that one person first, teaching them about what is going on, advocating, increasing awareness. That person also joined the community. Now, when we are introducing this, we are increasing awareness. You can't just say, hey, mental health is great. It's like physical health, so you should acknowledge it, stop all the stigma, and let's all move on. No, you gotta say, come down to everyone's everyday level. She was talking about the human condition, how we all struggle. And that champion being the person to say, hey, someone amongst us was struggling. Let's call it out. Let's talk about it. And also providing those services at the same time, normalizing the fact that this is just everyday struggling. I think that's how that can happen. Then parents taking that to their kids, and kids also discussing that in schools and helping the work teachers are already doing and school mental health professionals are doing may be the avenue here. I don't know how else, because parents are going to work. After work, it's the community and whatever organizations they're in. Perhaps targeting those ones first, and then them bringing it home, and also the child getting support from home and the school.
Well stated. Just as a closing question. I love that. Yeah, I do too. As a closing question, I think we can all admit here that this is probably an endemic problem on top of being epidemic. It's not going away anytime soon. On an individual level, what keeps y'all motivated to keep going every day? In the most positive way possible.
Well, personally, I kind of touched base on this already. When I get old, these are the children that's going to be in the community, and
Yeah.
I'd like for them to be able to have a good hold on their mental state and their functioning and decision making, so that if it ever came down to somebody taking care of me, I'm in good hands.
I do want to say two things. So my specialty is complex neurodevelopmental and genetic disorders. I love complexity. And most people don't like to do it, other psychiatrists, because it's time consuming. We're talking about more than 90 minutes of drilling. Even the child is tired, the parents are tired, everybody just wants to go home. But why I do it is because, first of all, there are not a lot of people that want to do it. And I understand that. There are not many in the community that want to do this. Number two is, we know what could happen if we don't. Just like you had mentioned, we've all been impacted by suicide. We've all been impacted by grief, loss, trauma. And you don't need to search too far. It's in this room. So that helps. And I had the unfortunate experience of waking up one Christmas morning, December 25th, I'm frying eggs, and the TV comes on, and my patient is in a high-speed chase and had killed someone. Because of impulsivity. She didn't want to follow her mom's instructions, grabbed the keys, and took off. In the mist, killed someone. Now, that is something she could never take back. She's in such a wonderful place. She's graduated school. She went to jail. She did. But now she's back. Or she sends me pictures. She's graduated high school, in college, doing well. But the problem is, we know what could happen if we don't do this. And so that's why I do it on a personal level. Some psychiatrists have had the unfortunate experience of their patients committing suicide. I had to see someone really go down before they could come up. So that was very impactful for me.
Can I be honest? I feel like, when you get those college essays, tell me why you went into the field, and you make all this stuff up.
You get back to give us one of those?
No, I don't know. I don't have a very good answer. I just love the field. Sorry. It is, I think, honestly, the best answer for me is, I like depth, actually. Like, I don't like superficial conversations. I just like depth, and this allows me actually to just, have real conversations with people and real human interactions. And I think, for me, that's what it is actually. Like, I can go there with people, and I think a lot of people have a hard time going into the pain. I don't have a hard time going into the pain. It's very rewarding to me to be present with people. So that's it for me. But yeah, it's reminding me of the college questions, because everyone's answering these college essays, and everyone writes awesome essays.
Yes.
Yeah. These weird answers. I'm like, do you really know why you love something? I don't know.
Yeah, I know. Well, Dr. Lay, Dr. Bapatope, Dr. Dindo, thank you for your time. Thank you for your work. And we appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
do want to thank everyone for their attendance and for their engagement.